Chapter 631 The Natural Disaster of Swallowing the Yuan Long. Well, it's really not suitable to continue moving forward. After looking at the situation in the distance, and roughly estimating the moving speed of the tornadoes, Shanlan Luodin also agreed to Wenlong's suggestion. The same was true for Long Tong Shisa. But Long Pu Shisa didn't say anything. He just nodded, and gave the order to stop to all the members of Wang Li's hunting group. All hunters are fine. Stop advancing now, and get ready to fight the abyss-devouring dragon right here. As soon as the order came out, all the hunters stopped, including of course the blacksmiths who were with the team, and the black cats who supplemented the Elu Cat rescue team. Of course, the so-called stop does not mean that you can rest. On the contrary, this is when the real busyness begins. Because according to Wenlong's plan, hunting the Yuan dragon requires the help of large machinery. And it will take a long time to assemble the large machinery at this time. For example, now, when the team stopped, the forgers from the various forging houses in MHOL first unloaded the mechanical parts they carried, and then began to assemble them together with the Elu Cats. Judging from the appearance of those parts, it seems that what the blacksmith wants to build this time is a huge crossbow. And there is not only one such crossbow, but several starting to build it at the same time. All the work is going on nervously. And during the period when the blacksmiths are busy, some of the hunters are responsible for providing adequate protection for the blacksmiths, while the other part is responsible for blocking and intercepting the Yuan dragon, so as to provide better protection for the rear. Build your position to buy more time. The legendary hunter team headed by Wenlong has obviously become the main force in blocking the Yuan dragon this time. As for protecting the safety of the blacksmith and the Elu Cats, it is left to the hunters with average strength. After all, except for the abyss-swallowing dragon, there are no very powerful monsters in the thunderous sand sea now, and most ordinary hunters can handle them with ease. Okay, do you understand what we are going to do this time? Meow? Before setting off, Wenlong asked Catherine and Haitang beside him. Understood. Is it to delay the movement speed of the abyss-devouring dragon as much as possible? Catherine said. Well, that's not entirely correct. It should be said that before the position for hunting the Yuan Long is set up, don't let the swallowing dragon get close to it. But if the position is set up, then I will use my ability to ensure that the swallowing dragon is attract the Yuan dragon to come over, Wenlong said. You want to attract the Yuan dragon here? Catherine was a little confused. Of course, when the position for hunting the Yuan dragon is ready, we will be responsible for luring the Yuan dragon there. Otherwise, if the Yuan dragon bypasses the position we prepared and goes directly to MHOL, then our previous won't the preparation be in vain? Then why are we spending so much effort preparing the position? Meow! Understood. Catherine nodded again and said, before the position for hunting the Yuan dragon is completed, we must first prevent the Yuan dragon from approaching. And after the position is completed, we must ensure that the Yuan dragon does not deviate from its trajectory and guide the Yuan dragon to in the hunting camp. Okay, what about you? Little girl, do you understand? Wenlong looked at Haitang, who had barely spoken before, and then asked, Haitang understands too. Haitang nodded. Then let's go. Let's hurry up, so that we can contact the Yuan dragon as soon as possible. Meow. After saying that, Wenlong took the lead and rushed towards the place where the tornado was, while Catherine and Haitang followed closely behind Wenlong. Because Wenlong knew that right there, among those black tornadoes, there must be a Yuan-devouring dragon causing trouble. As Wenlong and others gradually approached the edge of the tornadoes in Wenlong's eyes also seemed to grow taller and taller. The surrounding wind walls are also rotating rapidly. Unlike the steel dragon that can control the wind, the swallowing dragon does not have the ability to control these tornadoes, but can cause catastrophic changes in the weather just because of its own existence. Mr. Cat, it feels like the wind here is so strong. Haitang's arrows may not be able to shoot accurately. Seeing the black tornado connecting the sky and the earth like a black chimney, Haitang felt that he and his arrows of insignificance. After all, the winds of tornadoes are completely different from those of ordinary typhoons. Among them, tornadoes, especially in the case of multiple tornadoes, will also be affected by this and become extremely changeable and difficult to control. This is because each tornado will have an impact on the surrounding airflow due to its own speed and direction. When there are multiple tornadoes, these tornadoes will also affect each other, and sometimes the airflows will collide, offset, and sometimes superimposed. The wind will become more violent. So when encountering this kind of situation, You may be able to control the wind direction at first, but later you will encounter several completely different turbulences. In this case, even if Haitang can understand the changes in the airflow, it is impossible to consider every turbulence. In this case, the arrow shot by Haitang will suffer greater losses. If he wants to shoot the arrow with the same accuracy as before, hitting the target is difficult. It doesn't matter. Wenlong understood Haitang's shortcomings very well, and then said, "Hunting is never a person's business. Don't always think that you are enough alone. Now our primary goal is to pass through these tornadoes. Be careful to avoid them as much as possible. Stay away. Otherwise you will be swept up by these tornadoes, which will be very dangerous. Meow." Therefore, even though these tornadoes could bring extremely serious harm, Wenlong and others still dodged and shuttled between these tornadoes. The scene even reminded Wenlong of some games he had played before, which also required manipulation. The protagonist avoids various dangers and finally reaches the destination. However, Wenlong and others are already legendary hunters after all, so it is not difficult to avoid such tornadoes. So after spending about 20 minutes, Wenlong and others finally passed through several areas where tornadoes were raging, and then entered an open area. Just as the wind force at the center of the tornado is actually very small. This time Wenlong and others passed through the outer wall of the tornado and felt that the airflow around them suddenly became calmer. The wind is calmed down, and there have been less sandstorms. I feel that my eyesight has also improved. Meow. At this time, looking ahead, Wenlong easily spotted the swallowing dragon with his body half buried in the ground. Chapter 632, Heaven and Earth. The whole body of this Yuanyan dragon is covered with brown carapace, and the whole body looks like a huge turtle. In terms of body size, it is about the same level as Tyrannosaurus, but it has two huge fins on both sides of the body, which can also be used as wings to control wind. Can the Yuanyan dragon still burrow underground? At this time, when she saw the Yuanyan dragon for the first time, Catherine felt a little incredible. Based on her previous understanding, Catherine already knew that the Yuanyan dragon could actually fly, but she did not expect that the Yuanyan dragon could even sneak in the desert. After all, generally speaking, it is not uncommon for monsters to be able to fly or burrow. But monsters, like the Yuanyan dragon, that can not only burrow, but also fly are very rare. In particular, the body of the Yuanyuanlong is still so large. It is so strange that such a large body can move freely in the sky and on the ground. But at this time Wenlong also replied, "This thing can only fly underground in the desert area, and it mainly uses the hot air in the desert area. But overall it is still very magical. Meow." In fact, even Wenlong himself has a hard time understanding how a huge monster like Tunyuanlong can fly in the air. He just heard that it is related to the ability of the body to produce gases that are lighter than air. And then these gases will exist in the body of Tunyuanlong, in the air bag, thus generating the buoyancy that allows the swallowing dragon to fly in the air. However, it is not important what the reason is. What is important is how to deal with the swallowing dragon lurking underground at this moment, with only its back exposed. Although Wenlong and others had fought against the monster Sharon King before that, which could also sneak into the sand and move freely. But unlike Sharon King, the swallowing dragon, as an ancient dragon species, was not afraid of things like sonic bombs. In other words, if the swallowing dragon remains underground and refuses to come out, it will be difficult for Wenlong and others to cause harm to it. At this time, Haitang and Lin also rushed over. When they saw the swallowing dragon, Haitang and Lin couldn't help but stop. At this time, Wenlong said to Haitang, "Hit its back with arrows and draw it out." Meow. Understood. Haitang nodded, immediately began to draw out the arrow, and then began to accumulate power. At this time, Ren asked again, "What about me?" "Stay away. This is not a place you can handle." "Naya," Wenlong said to Ren. After all, Wenlong knew that in terms of strength, Ren still had some shortcomings. And here he was going to fight against the swallowing dragon, which was an ancient dragon species. If he brought a teammate who was too weak, he might not be able to help in any way, but will waste energy because of the need to take care of weak teammates. Therefore, Wenlong did not agree with letting Ren participate in the battle. "I don't want it. I want to be with Sister Catherine." Ren always disagreed, holding Catherine's wrist, and then said, "Sister Ren, be obedient." Catherine stroked Ren's head and said, "But when Isama, I can't just watch you fight and do nothing myself. It's okay. I don't want Ren to get hurt. Ren can just watch from the side." Seeing Catherine speaking firmly, Rin could only let go of her hand, and then temporarily stepped aside, with a look of unwillingness in her eyes. On the contrary, Haitang, who was about the same age as Rin, glanced at Rin meaningfully. It seems to be saying, if you are not strong enough, just leave it alone. Ah, I really want to fight with Wani-sama, Rin thought. At this time, Haitang had finished charging up, and then aimed diagonally upward and shot the arrow in his hand. Projection! Sky-shaped arrow! An arrow shot into the air, and when it reached directly above the Yuan dragon, it split into several different arrows, and then fell from the sky together like raindrops. At this moment, Tun Yuanlong happened to be directly below Wenlong and others. A dense rain of arrows fell on the swallowing dragon. Although such an attack could not cause much damage to the swallowing dragon, it was enough to attract the attention of this huge monster. So this huge, dry sea fierce god temporarily stopped its progress and slightly raised its head from the sand. Finally, it noticed a few tiny humans not far in front of it. Ah! The swallowing dragon let out a huge roar. The dragon roar of the ancient dragon species is much more powerful than ordinary monsters. If it is just an ordinary hunter, then it is very likely that just hearing the sound is enough to lose combat effectiveness. Even Wenlong and others can only face this situation. You can temporarily cover your ears to reduce the damage to your body caused by this huge dragon roar. However, compared with Wenlong and others, Rin was obviously a few points behind. Just when Wenlong and others could hold on, Rin felt her body soften and almost fell to the ground. Is this the ancient dragon species? Lin, who realized the power of the ancient dragon species for the first time, squatted on the ground in pain, and it took a while to recover from the dragon's roar. At this time, looking at Wenlong and others who had already drawn their weapons and headed towards the Tun Yuan dragon, Lin finally realized the huge gap between the two sides. Wani-sama and her friends are even more powerful than the last time I met them. Finally, Rin couldn't help but sigh in her heart. So the gap between Rin and Wani-sama has become so big? At this time, Rin finally realized that what Wenlong said before was right. With his current strength, if he joins forcefully, the final result will only be to drag down the entire team. So at this moment, Rin finally gave up the idea of continuing to stay with Catherine, and instead turned around and found a rock a little further away to hide. It should be safe at such a long distance. Let me admire Sister Catherine's heroic fighting style here, Rin thought. At this time, the battle has officially begun. The swallowing dragon raised its body from the ground and rushed towards Wenlong and others. It looked like a person swimming breaststroke in the desert, as the two fins on both sides of the body moved up and down. The swallowing dragon's body up and down, sinking and floating. Although the movements of the swallowing dragon seemed clumsy, because its body was quite huge. It took only a few ups and downs for the swallowing dragon to reach Wenlong and others. The next time the head of Tunuanosaurus emerges from the ground, it will be at our feet. Meow. Relying on the estimation of the movement trajectory of Tunuanosaurus, Wenlong quickly predicted in his mind the position and precise location of Tunuanosaurus' head emerging from the sand. Time. Chapter 633. 3, 2, 1. Wenlong counted down in his heart. When he reached 0, Wenlong suddenly shouted loudly, "Get out of the way! Meow!" Wenlong's voice reminded Catherine and Haitang. And then Wenlong, Catherine and Haitang hit on both sides at the same time. After all, this was not the first time they fought against ancient dragons. The three of them all moved very quickly. This ordinary impact could not hurt Wenlong and others. On the contrary, at the moment of dodging, Wenlong also threw the dive ball accurately stuck to the body of Tun Yuanlong. For a time, the dive ball left an eye-catching mark on the body of the swallowing dragon. And the pungent smell also spread. Originally, with a huge body like the swallowing dragon, Wenlong didn't need to worry about being unable to track the opponent. However, considering that the swallowing dragon often sneaked into the sand, the strong smell emitted by the dive ball at this time was it allows Wenlong to more accurately perceive the location of Tun Yuanlong underground. Sure enough, after an unsuccessful collision, the Yuanlong dived into the sand again, this time directly diving its entire body into it. And then, the sand that was originally separated by the activities of the Yuanlong dived as quickly as if it were alive, gathered together, leaving no trace. As expected, he went down again. But there's nothing to be afraid of. Naya! Even through a layer of sand and soil, Wenlong could distinguish the pungent smell emanating from the ground. And in an instant, he could clearly see the movements of Tun Yuanlong. At first, the swallowing dragon rushed towards Wenlong himself. But soon, Wenlong discovered that the swallowing dragon actually changed its direction before approaching him. The huge body could turn dexterously in the sand, which surprised Wenlong. However, relying on the information provided by the dive ball, Wenlong could accurately judge the next move of Tun Yuanlong. Little girl, let's go to your place. Meow. Vaguely, Wenlong felt that Tun Yuanlong had bypassed him, and then rushed towards Haitang's position. After receiving Wenlong's advance warning, Haitang certainly would not sit still and wait for death. Instead, she reacted immediately, putting away the hunting bow in her hand while running continuously. When there was a shock under her feet, Haitang swooped forward again. Boom! At this time, the huge body of the swallowing dragon jumped out of the sand, and dust flew for a while. In the sand, the huge and wide body of the swallowing dragon swooped over with a fierce impact. Seeing that Tun Yuanlong was about to pounce on Haitang, Haitang was already lying on the ground. As a result, Tun Yuanlong's body passed over Haitang's body, but it did not hurt Haitang at all. Originally, with the huge body of the swallowing dragon, it was very difficult to avoid the flying attack of the swallowing dragon, but now Haitang could do it easily, which made Haitang naturally very grateful. Thank you so much to Mr. Cat, Haitang thought in her heart. Don't be distracted. The attack is not over yet. Meow! Wenlong warned him immediately, probably after noticing that Haitang had glanced at him distractedly. However, a warning was a warning, and Wenlong still did not relax his insight into the Yin Yuan dragon. As a result, the subsequent attacks of the Yin Yuan dragon all failed because of Wenlong's timely warning. Not only that, every time the swallowing dragon failed to fly, the result was that Haitang seized the short opportunity for the swallowing dragon to break out of the ground and launch several attacks in succession, which actually broke the scales on the huge fin of the swallowing dragon. At this time, the continuous failure to catch prey and Haitang's repeated attacks finally made Tun Yuanlong impatient. So the dry sea fierce god in the desert changed his previous attack method and switched to he came out of the ground and exposed his entire body to the ground. Great! All I want is for you to come out from underground. Now I'm going to show off my power. Meow! Seeing that Tun Yuanlong actually gave up the cover of the sand and exposed his body to the ground, Wenlong felt extremely happy in his heart. So Wenlong immediately rushed over first. As soon as he got close to the swallowing dragon, Wenlong immediately activated his transformation technique. Transform! Wenlong shouted loudly. However, this time, Wenlong's transformation technique did not react at all. Not only that, but because of his temporary hesitation, Wenlong lost an important attack opportunity. Because very quickly, the Tun Yuan dragon swiped its tail again, almost hitting Wenlong. But Wenlong's reaction was astonishing, and he dodged away. What's going on? Why can't you change? Oh, by the way, the last time I transformed was when I was fighting the members of the Poison Beak organization in Beacon City Walled City. Meow. Wenlong suddenly remembered that the interval between each transformation of this bracelet was 24 hours, which meant that it would take at least several hours for Wenlong to transform next time. Oh meow! The duration has finally been lengthened, but the cooling time has not had time to shorten. Why is this happening? Meow! Feeling that his transformation technique was not playing its original role, Wenlong could only temporarily give up the transformation that would make him more powerful, and instead continued to rush towards the Tun Yuan dragon in the form of El Cat. Aya! Suddenly, Tun Yuanlong roared again, and then the body of Tun Yuanlong tightened, and Wenlong felt that something was not good. Be careful. It's a sand cannon attack. Meow! Although Wenlong's reaction had reached a level beyond the reach of most people, it was still a little slow at this moment, because this time, besides Wenlong rushing towards the Tun Yuan dragon, Catherine also rushed over without hesitation. However, Wenlong's voice reached Catherine, and it was too late for Catherine to escape. Bang! Just like a sponge filled with water that was suddenly squeezed and spewed out a column of water, the swallowing dragon suddenly squeezed its huge body, which turned out to be a way to launch all the sand and dust in the body. After all, the swallowing dragon had been active underground in the desert for too long. During that time, in addition to sneak attacks on Wenlong and others, another important thing for the swallowing dragon was to collect enough sand and dust and store it in its body, in case for need. But now, when he saw Wenlong and Catherine rushing towards him, it was already a situation where Tun Yuanlong realized the crisis. So at this moment, Tun Yuanlong released all the dust accumulated before. The tiny grains of sand are like pebbles shot out by an explosion at this moment, with bullet-like lethality. And there were so many of them. They were overwhelming towards Catherine. Chapter 634 Continuous Attack. For hunters who use melee weapons, Yuanlong's sand cannon attack is a very threatening move. It is launched quickly and covers a large area, making it difficult to guard against. Fortunately, Yuanlong flew to the ground in time and avoided most of the sand attacks. The small amount of sand that fell on his body was forcibly withstood by his armor. Even so, Yuanlong will still inevitably suffer some damage. But it is much better than standing still and getting hit all at once. Moreover, such a small amount of damage can be quickly recovered by taking the recovery medicine G. So it is not a big problem. Catherine, on the other hand, had no time to dodge, so she could only quickly set up her big sword to resist. However, because the sand cannon attack broke out so fast, the big sword was not fully set up yet. A large amount of sand and dust has already rushed towards us. In an instant, a large amount of sand and dust completely covered Catherine's body. If you look from a distance, you can see that Catherine's body has been completely engulfed by the sand and dust, and it is impossible to see Catherine's condition at that time. Fortunately, this only happened for a moment, but when the dust dissipated, Catherine had already fallen to the ground. It turned out that at that moment, Catherine, who had hurriedly defended, had not yet regained her balance. Although the sword blocked most of the sprayed sand, the huge impact still caused Catherine to sit down on the ground. Obviously, Mr. Cat has warned me. And before the battle, Mr. Cat also specifically explained the skills of the swallowing dragon. But I didn't expect that I still fell into this trick. At this time, because the skill of the swallowing dragon was activated too fast, there was no time to make a defensive move. Catherine was also a little annoyed. But in general, Catherine still withstood most of the attacks with her big sword. Even if some sand grains hit her, the defense created by the Tyrannosaurus material on Catherine could effectively resolve this level of damage. In contrast, only Hai Tang was not affected much because it occupied a relatively far distance. After all, although the initial speed of these ejected sand particles was very fast, they were too small and would not be far away. It dissipated due to violent friction with the air. Fortunately, I didn't suffer much damage. At this time, Catherine, who was lying on the ground, checked her body condition and prepared to stand up again. But she heard Yuanlong shouting again. Catherine, get out of the way! Meow! Again! Here we go again! It can be seen that a sand cannon attack brought Catherine to the ground. The Yuan dragon also found an opportunity to continue the attack, so it rushed towards Catherine again. Seeing that the Yuan dragon was approaching, Catherine could only he quickly rolled on the ground, trying to move his body quickly to avoid the attack of the Yuan dragon. After all, the moment she saw the huge and powerful body of the swallowing dragon pressing towards her, Catherine already knew that it was no longer possible to use the sword to defend herself. Because no matter how strong he is, he can't hold up the entire body of the Yuan dragon. So rolling and dodging became Catherine's only option to avoid the Yuan dragon at this time. However, the attack range of the Yuan dragon is too wide. The body itself is quite huge, and coupled with the fins spread out on both sides like the two front legs of a turtle, the swallowing dragon has a particularly wide attack range when it swoops forward. At this time, it became impossible for Catherine, who was lying on the ground, to avoid the Yuan-devouring dragon's attack by just rolling. Boom! Finally, although Catherine escaped the frontal attack of the Yuan dragon, the fins on both sides still passed by Catherine, knocking Catherine to the ground again. Ah! Catherine screamed in surprise. And then she was knocked and flew more than 20 meters away. This shows how powerful this abyss-swallowing dragon is. Catherine, are you okay? Meow! Sister Catherine! It's not bad. Finally, Catherine insisted on standing up. Although just now, Yuanlong had noticed that the armor made of Tyrannosaurus materials on Catherine's body had a crack. The armor made from Tyrannosaurus materials can be said to be the most top-notch armor on the entire continent, and its defensive power is unquestionable. It can be seen that if it were not for the protection of this set of armor, Catherine would have been unable to stand up just now. However, Catherine was still traumatized after all. If she could not take the recovery medicine G in time for treatment, I am afraid that the next battle would be affected. But of course, this abyss-swallowing dragon would not give Catherine a chance to breathe, and soon continued to pounce on Catherine. Don't even think about it! Meow! At this time, Yuanlong finally rushed over. Originally, Yuanlong was quite fast, but the moment he rushed out, he activated Second Art! Sukasanaji! without any hesitation. The secret of this Tai sword move is that it is the fastest moving move among the Tai sword skills. It can quickly close the distance between Wenlong and Tuan Yuan Dragon in a short period of time. So Catherine was activated from the mysteries. And Wenlong's figure seemed to have disappeared. At the next moment, Wenlong had already appeared beside Tuan Yuanlong, and was swinging at the same speed that could not be caught. Took out the weapon in his hand. Crack! Blood burst out along with the red and black dragon energy. Even the scales and carapace of the Yin Yuan dragon quickly opened a scar under Wenlong's attack. Okay. Hit! Meow! With one move, Wenlong felt the texture of the weapon cutting into the body of Tuan Yuanlong. But Wenlong also knew that this level of damage was far from enough. After all, Wenlong is still in the form of Elu Cat, and his strength is far inferior to that of the human form. In addition, due to the size of his body, the double sword he uses, Sealing Dragon Sword Jinju Isect, is only one of them. It is alone. So even if it can cut through the SHL of the Yuan Yuan Dragon, it will not be able to cause more damage. Of course, Wenlong's purpose was not to seriously injure the ancient dragon species, Tuan Yuanlong, with one blow. After all, this was impossible and unrealistic. In Wenlong's view, his goal has been achieved now, which is to let the Yin Yuan dragon shift the target of its attack to himself, winning precious breathing time for Catherine. Roar! At this time, the swallowing dragon roared again. This is the anger of the swallowing dragon. For the swallowing dragon, it is really unbearable for a small human being to be able to stand up after being knocked down by him. However, what is even more unbearable is that an ignorant Elu Cat dared to hurt himself with a weapon. Chapter 635 Dancing with the Sand. In the ancient and long memory of Tuan Yuanlong, there has never been any injury by Elu Cat. Even most of the time, Elu Cats hardly dare to appear in front of him. Occasionally, there are a few brave ones who dare to follow the hunters to challenge. But they are often completely scared away by the roar of the Yuan Yuan dragon. Because the swallowing dragon decided to teach the ignorant Elu Cat in front of him a lesson. While launching the dragon roar, the swallowing dragon also began to use its best ability, which is to control the sand. Yes, it is not a simple attack method such as swallowing the sand and then spitting it out, or shooting it out, but a more complicated one, almost to the extent of manipulation, to the extent that you can do whatever you want. There are endless tiny grains of sand everywhere in this vast sea of sand. Although a single grain of sand is of little use, if these grains of sand are gathered together, they will be powerful enough to destroy a city. But now, Tuan Yuanlong felt it was time to show his true skills. As a result, in front of Wenlong and others, something even more incredible happened. The sand and dust that should have been on the ground or blown by the wind actually gathered together as if they were alive, and then condensed in the air into pieces of sand aggregates. It looks like a pile of sand. But Wenlong and others know that this seemingly inconspicuous thing is actually composed of tons, or even dozens of tons of sand and dust. When it falls in the air, its power is quite terrifying. Oh meow! It's endless! Wenlong complained as he activated his ghost transformation, and then used his speed advantage to quickly dodge. And those piles of sand gathered around Wenlong as if they understood Wenlong's direction of action. The top of the dragon's head. And then they all fell down. Boom! 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 Several piles of sand fell from the sky like this. But it was as if he could predict the timing of the Yan Yuanlong's attack. Every time another pile of sand fell, Wenlong could change his direction in an instant, and then use subtle movements. Diffing dodged the Yuan Yuan dragon's attack. And Wenlong not only avoided the attack of the Yin Yuan dragon, but more importantly, Wenlong also bought precious time for Catherine and Haitang. Among them, Catherine got a chance to breathe. After all, if she was chased and beaten by the Yuan Yuan dragon, even Catherine would not be able to find a chance to regroup, let alone fight back against the Yuan Yuan dragon. Haitang, on the other hand, took advantage of the precious opportunity when the Yuan Yuan dragon set its target on Catherine, and once again completed the charging of the hunting bow. 3 stages of charged piercing arrows. A piercing arrow that had been charged in 3 stages was shot towards the Tuan Yuan dragon, and then accurately hit the body of the Tuan Yuan dragon. Then the arrows successfully broke through the carapace of the Tuan Yuan dragon, and finally penetrated into the Tuan Yuan dragon, inside the body of a dragon. Great! Successful. Although the Yuan Yuan dragon can dive into the sand and fly, and its flexibility far exceeds that of a super huge monster like the walled crab, its defensive capabilities are far inferior to the walled crab that is like a fortress. Therefore, although Haitang's penetrating arrow, move cannot completely break through the carapace of the crab. It is different for the swallowing dragon. The arrow not only broke through the carapace of the swallowing dragon, but also pierced into the flesh of the dragon. Although this does not mean that Haitong's attack caused much damage. It was like a knife piercing into the flesh. Just like a burr. Even if it doesn't hurt much, it can still make people feel extremely uncomfortable. Ah Wu, Tun Yuanlong felt the pain from his body again. And this time it came from a human girl standing in the distance with a hunting bow. Only then did Tun Yuanlong truly understand that the two human women and an Elu cat here were not economical lamps. Each one has the ability to cause damage to itself. Although such damage is insignificant, it does not mean that such damage can be ignored. Ah! It was a more terrifying roar than before. The characteristic dragon roar of Tun Yuan dragon sounds very different from that of ordinary dragons. Rather than a dragon roar, it is more like the sound made by violent airflow blowing through the body of Tun Yuan dragon, which is full of gaps and holes. At this time, Yin Yuanlong's ability to manipulate sand finally began to enter a new stage, which was also the stage that Wenlong had been worried about before. The grains of sand that originally just gathered together and then fell from the sky changed their shape again. These sand grains began to separate, returning from the originally gathered form of sand piles to the form of flying sand dust, and then began to gather towards the body of the swallowing dragon. This time, these sand grains began to float around the body of Tun Yuanlong, making Wenlong and others look like a sphere made of sand wrapped around Tun Yuanlong. At this time, surrounded by sand and dust, ordinary people could no longer get close. Wenlong and Catherine could only choose to push away temporarily, while Haitang tried to pull out an arrow and shoot it towards the Tun Yuan dragon. As a result, the sand surrounding the swallowing dragon was blocked before it even touched the body of the swallowing dragon. It can be seen that even a legendary hunter like Haitang, who can use long-range attacks, cannot easily let his thin arrows penetrate the endless protection composed of dense sand grains around the Tun Yuan dragon, not to mention causing more damage to the Yuanin dragon. This. Both Catherine and Haitang looked at the scene in front of them in surprise, while Wenlong couldn't help but wipe his sweat. Little girl, how long is the scheduled time until the completion of the position? So Wenlong asked Haitang on the side. There are still 30 minutes, Haitang replied. It's been so long, so we have no choice but to dodge as much as possible until the formation is completed, Wenlong said loudly. Hold on for 30 minutes. We can't let the abyss-swallowing dragon reach our position 30 minutes ago. Meow! Clear! Catherine and Haitang nodded at the same time. And at this time, the huge Yuan dragon, wrapped in the sand balls surrounding its body, slowly left the ground and then floated up. That is a completely different flying method from flying dragons such as the male fire dragon and the female fire dragon. In comparison, the Tun Yuan dragon is more like a hot air balloon floating in the air, while the two huge fins of the Tun Yuan dragon become a floating in the sky, like a rowing oar. It pushed the huge body of the swallowing dragon to move in the air. Therefore, even though the body of Tun Yuanlong is so bloated and so different from the lean bodies of other flying dragons, it can still fly freely in the air. Chapter 636, Earthshaking. When the Yuan dragon flew into the sky, more desert tornadoes appeared around the Yuan dragon. Relying on its familiarity with the airflow in the desert, Tun Yuanlong can easily create a violent tornado that can stir up a large amount of sand and dust by just drawing an arc in the air with its huge fins. The result is that within a few rounds, the black tornado that rolled up the dust on the ground has been raging around the Yuan dragon. If you add this ferocious beast floating in the gloomy sky full of dust, at this moment, the scene really feels like the end is coming. The fierce god of the dry sea really deserves his reputation. Meow. Seeing the terrifying power displayed by Tun Yuanlong at this moment, Wenlong and others knew that there was no way to confront Tun Yuanlong at this moment. They could only avoid its edge temporarily, and delay the construction of rear positions for precious time. So Wenlong immediately shouted loudly, Disperse quickly. Don't stand together. Meow! Following Wenlong's instructions, Catherine and Haitang immediately dispersed. The biggest advantage of doing so was that it could distract Tun Yuanlong and avoid being eaten away by Tun Yuanlong due to excessive concentration. No matter what, as long as they spread out, even if someone is hit by the Yuan dragon, there will be others who can continue to delay the time. But in this case, because they are far away from each other, it will be difficult to rescue each other. It's more troublesome. But it doesn't matter. Now the target of the Yuan dragon is on me. If nothing else happens, the Yuan dragon should keep staring at me, so that it will not affect Catherine and the little girl. Wenlong planned this in his heart. So with this idea in mind, Wenlong began to lure the Tuing Yuan dragon away from Catherine and Hai Tang. Anyway, the main purpose now was to delay time, not to hunt the Tuing Yuan dragon. So Wenlong didn't have to worry about himself. The problem of insufficient human output is eliminated, and all the attention needs to be focused on avoiding the Yuanyan dragon's attack. The result was as Wenlong expected. Just after Wenlong separated from Catherine and Hai Tang, the abyss-swallowing dragon rushed towards him. After all, we just fought against the Yuanyan dragon, and only Wenlong used the secret technique that caused the highest damage. Therefore, compared to Hai Tang and Catherine, it was Wenlong who caused the most damage to the Yuanyan dragon, and therefore attracted the most hatred. Great! You are really targeting me, Naya! So Wenlong ran while avoiding the black tornado in front of him. And behind Wenlong was the huge Yuan dragon chasing after him. Come on! You stupid turtle! Come and chase me! Meow! From time to time, Wenlong would turn around and make faces at the swallowing dragon behind him in order to annoy him even more. It has to be said that Wenlong is indeed the fastest among the three, and he is also the best at evading. Therefore, even though the swallowing dragon has the ability to fly and can trigger a lot of desert tornadoes, Wenlong can't, being able to cope with it with ease and escaping without any danger every time. Time passed by very quickly, and it was almost time to reach the agreed time of 30 minutes. It's almost 30 minutes! It seems everything is going well. Then we just need to wait for the signal from the position, and then we can guide the Yin Yuan Long to the position. Meow. However, at this moment, another change occurred in the sky. Just as Wenlong was running, suddenly, Wenlong felt that the wind direction around him changed again. Originally, because there were a large number of desert tornadoes interacting with each other around the Yuan Long, the wind direction changed frequently, which was not a particularly unusual thing. But this time Wenlong clearly felt that the airflow changes caused by the previous tornadoes suddenly disappeared. And then all the winds around him changed direction and flowed in the same direction. Why is it meow? Suddenly, an ominous premonition emerged in Wenlong's heart. He turned around and looked, only to see that the Yuanyan dragon was breathing heavily. It is more accurate to say that it is inhaling. It is better to say that it is swallowing. The meaning of the word Tuan Yuan in the so-called Yin Yuan dragon is fully reflected at this moment. The huge mouth of the swallowing dragon is like an endless abyss that cannot be seen to the bottom. When the swallowing dragon takes a big breath, the sand and soil on the ground are also sucked up. And the one running in front of the swallowing dragon is Wenlong also clearly felt the terrifying suction force of the Tuing Yuan dragon. And his whole body was pushed back by the huge wind force and the mixed sand and dust. Too bad. I forgot about the shaking the earth move of the Yuanyan dragon. And I am still in the body of El Cat, which is very different from the human body. Meow. Wenlong was shocked and shouted that something was wrong. In fact, Wenlong has always been very familiar with the moves of the Yin Yuan dragon. Therefore, if it is based on past experience, even if the Yin Yuan dragon uses this move, it is enough to suck a large amount of sand and dust into the air. Ground. Wenlong also had a way to escape in danger. It's just that this time Wenlong didn't consider that he was still in the body of an Elu Cat at this moment. As an Elu Cat, Wenlong's body was much smaller and lighter than in human form. In this way, the distance that Wenlong should be able to escape would not be able to escape if it were El Cat's body. This principle is the same as a vacuum cleaner that can easily pick up dust, but has a hard time picking up stones. A greater weight will obviously become more advantageous at this moment, and Wenlong's light body has become a kind of an irreparable disadvantage. Oh meow! It turns out that being too underweight is also wrong. Meow! Wenlong complained as he sped up and ran forward. But of course Tuan Yuan Long didn't let go of the prey it had finally spotted. So this terrifying, dry sea fierce god also increased its suction power. Call! At this moment, Wenlong actually felt that his steps became buoyant. And this was obviously a prelude to Wenlong's body being pulled into the air by the suction force created by the Yin Yuan dragon. Oh meow! There is such a strong suction force. Now my feet can't leave the ground. Once my feet leave the ground, it will be completely over. Meow! Wenlong also thought anxiously in his heart. After all, once Wenlong's body leaves the ground at this moment, it means that the last point of contact between Wenlong and the ground is gone. In that case, Wenlong's chance to catch the ground will be lost, let alone running. And lose it, you will eventually be sucked into the air by the Yuan dragon, and then suffer a terrible attack. Chapter 637 The Abyss of Despair. So Wenlong prepared to lower his body and run on all fours. At the same time, he also inserted the weapon, Sealing Dragon Sword, Shinjua Yaimen, in his hand into the sand, preparing to use this to increase his grip and stop himself. His body was sucked into the sky by the Yuan dragon. However, Wenlong soon discovered that doing so was just in vain. After all, this was a desert, not another place. Even if he inserted the sharp, Sealing Dragon Sword, Shinjua sect, into the sand, it would not have any effect. What's more terrifying is that the surrounding sand and soil are also sucked into the air. It is really an impossible task to fix one's body in such sand. Finally, Wenlong couldn't hold on any longer. As the sand and dust under his feet were sucked into the air, Wenlong felt that his body was floating and rising continuously. Moreover, the speed of this rise is getting faster and faster, which means that Wenlong's body is approaching the abyss-like mouth of the abyss-swallowing dragon at an accelerated rate. Even behind the swallowing dragon, Haitang kept using arrows to interfere with the swallowing dragon that was launching, shaking heaven and earth, and even used secret meaning, kill the first line. But it was just like scratching the surface, to no avail. After all, the arrows shot by Haitang are too light. In the face of hurricanes and sand, the arrows will quickly lose direction and speed. And even if it can create a vacuum wind blade, mystery, kill on the line. Because it itself it also relies on the power of airflow cutting. So it will be completely disturbed in the face of hurricanes and dust. By the time the swallowing dragon is around, there is not much power left. And finally, it will be completely eliminated by the scales and carapace of the swallowing dragon. Although Wenlong didn't want to give up. Seeing this situation, Wenlong felt helpless at this moment. Is it really going to end this time? Wenlong thought to himself. No, there must be some way. There must be something I just couldn't think of. Damn it. In despair, Wenlong couldn't help but turn around to see the scene behind him. But what he saw was just endless darkness and sand and dust that were constantly being swallowed up by the darkness. This terrible scene enveloped Wenlong and seemed to swallow up Wenlong's hope as well. I don't know if I will be swallowed by this monster, or if I will be sucked into the air and then crushed by the flat head of the Yuan dragon. At this moment, Wenlong thought again in his heart. After all, in Wenlong's view, no one seems to be able to save him now. Mr. Cat, I'm here to save you. At this time, Wenlong heard a familiar voice again. And then, Wenlong saw Catherine running over with a big sword on her back. It was very difficult to move in the soft desert wearing heavy armor, not to mention carrying an unconventionally huge sword on her back. This made Catherine's movement much slower than Haitang. So at this moment when Wenlong was in danger, Catherine appeared in Wenlong's sight later than Haitang. It's useless. The big sword is not a long-range weapon. Haitang can't do anything about it. What else can you do? Even though he said that, Wenlong still felt very relieved to be able to hear Catherine's voice at this moment. There is still a way, Catherine suddenly said loudly. My sword can break through the sand and dust of the abyss-swallowing dragon. Catherine, what do you want to do? Meow? Wenlong said in surprise. I will use my big sword to knock down the Yuan dragon. Idiot! This is impossible! The Yuan dragon is floating in the air now, so far away from the ground. Even you. It is impossible for such a supersized sword to be thrown such a high distance like a flying knife. Meow! Wenlong warned loudly. Indeed, as Wenlong said, the entire body of Tun Yuan Long is floating in the air now, dozens of meters away from the ground. And Catherine's sword is a super standard sword forged by Master Luo. Although the power is huge, but the weight is more than twice that of an ordinary sword. Even a hunter with uncanny strength like Catherine could barely throw such a heavy weapon a few tens of meters horizontally. But it would be completely impossible to throw it a few tens of meters high. It doesn't matter. A big sword is too heavy, so break it into two and throw them away. So Catherine took off the big sword from her back while running, and then turned the part where she held the handle. The original huge sword split apart and completely turned into two big swords. Then Catherine temporarily threw one of them aside, and at the same time held the remaining sword with both hands, stepped forward, and used the power of her waist to turn it, just like an athlete throwing a discus on a track and field. Posture and threw the big sword in his hand. Whoosh! The heavy sword indeed cut through the air, broke through the dust circle around the body of Tuan Yuan dragon, and then accurately hit the head of Tuan Yuan dragon. Bang! The thrown sword collided with the head of the swallowing dragon, making a crisp sound. Then Wenlong only saw the head of the swallowing dragon deviated slightly due to the huge impact. Yes, even after being attacked so fiercely, The head of the swallowing dragon was only slightly deviated. That's all. However, at the moment when Tun Yuanlong's head deviated slightly, Wenlong still clearly felt that the suction around him suddenly became smaller. This is because when the head of Tun Yuanlong deviates, the suction force is deflected, and the wind force around Wenlong is also reduced. But this was only a momentary thing. After all, the blow from Catherine just now did not bring much damage to Tun Yuanlong. Therefore, after being beaten a little, Tun Yuanlong still did not give up the pursuit of Wenlong. So Tun Yuanlong immediately adjusted his posture and pointed his huge mouth at Wenlong again. Just like that, Wenlong, who felt that the suction power had dropped slightly, was sucked up again before he fell to the ground. This time, he was sucked into the air at a faster speed. Mr. Cat! Seeing that the big sword she threw out only caused the opponent to tilt his head slightly, Catherine was stunned for a moment. But soon, Catherine came back to her senses. After all, seeing Wenlong being sucked into the air by the Yuan dragon, Catherine was also very anxious. No! I have to try again. My posture must have been wrong before, so I didn't exert my maximum strength. I will definitely be able to save Mr. Cat this time. At this time, Catherine raised the remaining big sword again, still aiming at the head of the Yuan dragon, and prepared to throw the remaining big sword out too. Chapter 638, Riding the Sword and Riding the Wind. But suddenly, Catherine stopped what she was doing, because at this moment, Catherine heard Wenlong saying something loudly. Throw it over here! Don't throw it away from the Yuan dragon. Throw it over here! Meow! Wenlong shouted loudly. Mr. Cat! Okay! In an instant, Catherine understood what Wenlong meant. So Catherine turned her body slightly, adjusted the direction, and then threw it towards Wenlong. Whoosh! The big sword in Catherine's hand shot out of the air instantly, flying towards Wenlong with the roar of the wind. But at this time, Tun Yuanlong had not yet figured out the situation. He didn't know why the second sword thrown by the human woman with strange strength had such a big error. At first, Tun Yuanlong thought it was Catherine who made a mistake and failed to aim at the target, causing the flight path of the second sword to deviate quite a distance from its own. But this is not important to Yin Yuanlong, because even if the opponent throws it at him accurately, Yin Yuanlong is fully capable of blocking the sword thrown from a distance. But now, it seemed that there was no need to block it, because the second roaring sword did not fly towards him at all, but flew towards the Elu Cat floating in the air. But just when the roaring sword was about to touch Wenlong, Wenlong suddenly shrunk in the air and missed the sword by just a hair. The big sword did not hit Wenlong, but passed by Wenlong. However, at the moment it brushed against the big sword, Wenlong also stretched out his tail and accurately wrapped the hilt of the big sword. In an instant, the heavy sword dragged Wenlong's light body away from the airflow created by Tun Yuanlong. Well done! Meow! Wrapping his tail around the hilt of the big sword, Wenlong felt as if he had hitched a ride on a fast-moving car. He was able to use the weight and huge kinetic energy of the big sword to break away from the control of the airflow sucked by the swallowing dragon. But although it doesn't sound complicated, only a very few people can actually do the scene just now. After all, just now, the big sword passed Wenlong at an extremely fast speed. At this moment, he not only had to avoid the edge of the big sword, but also grab the hilt of the big sword, letting the big sword carry his body, fly out, the whole movement down the mountain. The reaction ability alone is beyond what most people can achieve. Not to mention that at this critical moment, failure means death, and the test of psychological quality is also quite severe. As for the reason why Wenlong is able to do this, it is first related to his usual hard training. If Wenlong had not had super strength and could easily capture fast-moving targets, then Wenlong would not have been able to do so at this moment. Such an amazing feat to accomplish. In addition, it has something to do with Wenlong's trust in Catherine. If it were anyone else, Wenlong would probably not dare to propose such a bold battle plan, because Wenlong didn't believe that anyone else could throw a big sword into the air as accurately as Catherine did. At this time, Tun Yuanlong finally reacted completely, but it was already too late. At a glance, the heavy sword had already flown Wenlong a considerable distance away, and most importantly, the sword drew a parabola in the air due to its own weight, and finally landed on a little further away. As for Wenlong, just before the big sword was about to land, he instantly let go of the tail wrapped around the big sword, and then jumped off the big sword. The moment he landed, Wenlong used his roll to remove the kinetic energy from his body, and in the soft after rolling on the sand for several times. When Wenlong finally stood up again, There were only a few scratches on his body. It's so dangerous. Meow. Wenlong said with emotion in his heart as he looked at the Tuan Yuan dragon in the sky. After all, if he had been slower just now, he would have been swallowed by the Yuanyan dragon together with the sand, or directly crushed in the air by the Yuanyan dragon. Mr. Cat! Seeing that Wenlong was finally out of danger, Catherine ran over happily. Don't come here! Run now! Meow! But Wenlong suddenly shouted. Okay. Okay. At this time, Catherine had thrown out the two big swords in her hands. It could be said that she was without any weapons. Looking at the Yuanyan dragon again, the prey that was about to be captured just now was actually escaped because of Catherine. Lost it. This time the angry Yan Yuanlong turned around and rushed towards Catherine. Waving its wings, the swallowing dragon floating in the air quickly turned its body. After receiving Wenlong's warning, Catherine also realized that the situation was not good. So she immediately turned around and ran away. However, compared to the swallowing dragon flying in the air, Catherine running in the soft sand was still unable to reach her maximum speed. Therefore, no matter how hard Catherine tried her best, she was still a little slower than Tuan Yuanlong. So in Wenlong's eyes, he could already see that the distance between Tuan Yuanlong and Catherine was gradually shortening. Oh meow! Why hasn't the giant crossbow that fired restraint bullets been built yet? The time has obviously come. Meow! At this time, Wenlong could only think anxiously in his heart, while Wenlong and others were struggling to delay the progress of Tuan Yuanlong. In front of the route of Tuan Yuanlong, the Midgebolton blacksmiths headed by Master Luo had just completed the assembly of 6 giant crossbows. Work, however, the completion of the installation does not mean that it can be put into use immediately, because such a huge giant crossbow was made to fire restraint bombs. In order to ensure that after the restraint bombs hit the target, the giant crossbow will not be dragged by the extremely powerful Yuan dragon. Leaving the ground, these 6 giant crossbows are installed on extremely heavy pedestals. And such pedestals are also driven into the rock formations deep in the desert with thick and long rivets, which greatly increases their stability. It is not easy to do this. In addition to requiring the cooperation of blacksmiths and craftsmen, the participation of legendary hunters with strange powers, like Shanlan Luodin and Longtong Zaisa, is also an indispensable part. Therefore, during the entire process of installing the giant crossbow, legendary hunters such as Shanlan Luodin and Longtong Zaisa, as well as other strong and powerful elite hunters, were asked to install the heavy pedestal and help lay the foundation that penetrated the sand layer and reached the underground rock formation. Rivets. In this case, the power that could be used to protect the blacksmiths and craftsmen was much weaker. At this time, the position where the giant crossbows were installed was attacked by other monsters from the desert, which caused the entire position to fall into chaos. In the chaos, although the monster invasion was finally repelled, the final installation progress of the giant crossbow was a little later than expected. Chapter 639: The Pulling Rope. When the installation of the giant crossbow was completed, Shanlan Luodin personally lit the signal flare to indicate that it was ready. Red flames bloomed in the air, and at the same time, they made a huge roar. This allowed Wenlong and others who were fighting the Yuanyan dragon to clearly feel the arrival of the signal. Oh meow! The signal has finally come! I have been waiting for so long! Meow! The moment he saw the red fire exploding in the air, Wenlong immediately gave Catherine and Haitang the order to retreat. The position is ready. Now retreat in the direction of the hunting position. Meow! After that, under the leadership of Wenlong, Catherine and Haitang also joined together, and then retreated together in the direction of the position. Of course, Tuan Yuanlong would not let Wenlong and others go, and when he saw Wenlong and others gathered together again, Tuan Yuanlong felt that this was an excellent way to catch Wenlong and others in one fell swoop. Opportunity. So Tuan Yuanlong quickly followed up again, trying to use his huge body to press down from the air and crush Wenlong and others into pieces. However, seeing the swallowing dragon getting closer and closer to Wenlong and others also felt extremely critical. Even though the position was ready, they were still worried about whether they could finally lead the swallowing dragon safely. Position. Cat! Mr. Cat! The Yuan dragon is following again. Finally, Catherine said anxiously. I know. Don't be afraid. You and the little girl run away first, and leave this place to me. Meow! Wenlong said calmly. But you, Mr. Cat, it doesn't matter that I was sucked into the air just now because I made a mistake. I won't make the same mistake again this time. Moreover, I am the fastest and most suitable for being at the bottom. Even if you run first, I can still run quickly. Catch up with you. Meow. Yeah. Seeing Wenlong being so determined, Catherine could only continue to run towards the position with Haitang. Only Wenlong stayed and continued to face Tun Yuanlong. Oh meow. I finally waited until now. I have prepared not only the position for hunting the abyss-devouring dragon, but also the cooldown time for my transformation has finally arrived. Meow. Wenlong said to himself while taking out another dragon sealing sword, Jinjua sect. At this time, Tun Yuanlong didn't know what Wenlong was going to do. But he saw that this ignorant Elu Cat dared to stop and block in front of him. In Tun Yuanlong's view, if the human woman hadn't come to the rescue before, then this ignorant Elu Cat would have already entered his stomach. But now this Elu Cat is left alone. Like this, the behavior is undoubtedly no different from suicide. So the swallowing abyss dragon used the shaking the heaven and earth move it had used before, opened its huge abyss-like mouth, and began to inhale heavily. As before, a huge amount of sand and dust was sucked up from the ground. But this time Wenlong was still standing on the same spot, fiddling with the double swords, sealing dragon sword, Jinjua sect, in his hands, waiting for something. At this time, Tun Yuanlong continued to close the distance with Wenlong. And as the distance between the two parties became closer and closer, the suction force Wenlong could feel became stronger and stronger. We're almost at our limit then. Wenlong could clearly feel that his body was about to leave the ground due to the huge suction force of the swallowing dragon. But even so, Wenlong still did not make any reaction, but let his body be sucked by the swallowing dragon. Suck it up. At this moment, Tun Yuanlong even thought that he had succeeded. After all, without external interference, as long as the prey is sucked up by itself, there will be no possibility of escape. So Wenlong's body was sucked into the midair together with a large amount of sand and dust by Tun Yuanlong. And Tun Yuanlong also opened its huge mouth, preparing to swallow Wenlong in one bite. At this moment, Wenlong has reached the mouth of Tun Yuanlong. It seems that Wenlong's body is so small that it seems that it is not qualified to even fill the gap between the teeth of Tun Yuanlong, especially if it falls into the mouth of Tun Yuanlong. Possibility of survival. Mr. Cat! Catherine and Haitang, who had already run away, couldn't help shouting, even though both of them believed in Wenlong. There was no way not to worry about Wenlong. However, Catherine and Haitang only saw Wenlong smiling confidently. Transform! Suddenly, just when Wenlong was about to fall into the huge mouth of the swallowing dragon, Wenlong finally activated his transformation technique. As Wenlong groaned, Wenlong's body began to change. The original Illuma body instantly became a human form. And the weapon, sealing dragon sword, Jinjua sect, in his hand no longer looked like it was. It's like the sword in El Cat's hand, but it has truly become a pair of swords. The moment Wenlong's body changed, as his body changed, his weight also became heavier. This made Wenlong's rise slower than expected, and also made the swallowing dragon fall down with one bite. Null. At the same time, Wenlong used his second skill, Illuma's backwater formation. Using the skill of Elu Cat's water back formation, Wenlong's physical ability was instantly enhanced to the extreme. At this time, Wenlong flicked both arms at the same time, and actually used the two dragon sealing sword, Jinjua, in his hand. One door was thrown out. Mr. Cat, what is this? Looking at the shocking facts that appeared one after another in front of them, both Catherine and Haitang found it difficult to understand. But soon they discovered that there was another mystery in it. Crack! Crack! Two flying dragon sealing sword, true ultimate one, pierced into the back of Tun Yuanlong. And only then did Catherine and Haitang finally notice that these two dragon sealing sword, true ultimate one, the hilt of the sword is also tied with extremely strong spider silk. Then Wenlong pulled hard again. Like an agile Spider-Man, Wenlong's whole body was pulled into the air by the spider silk, bypassing the head of Tun Yuan dragon, and jumped directly onto Tun Yuan's back. After all, the biggest reason why Wenlong was sucked up before was that after leaving the ground, his body became airborne. Wenlong lost his point of strength and was unable to control his body. Now, using the two knives to pierce the back of the swallowing dragon, and then using the ropes tied to the handles of the two knives as attraction, Wenlong can also use this to pull his body to avoid the attack of the swallowing dragon. When he saw that the prey that was about to fall into his mouth suddenly jumped on his back, Tun Yuanlong was also shocked, and his whole body began to roll in the air, trying to throw Wenlong off of him. Chapter 640, Run, Hunter. However, at this time, Wenlong had firmly grasped the two swords. No matter how the Tun Yuanlong rolled in the air, Wenlong would not let go. Of course, it was not that easy to knock Wenlong out of the air. So, after rolling several times, and finding that Wenlong could not be thrown off his body, Tun Yuanlong decided to change his strategy. Shrink the huge fins on both sides of his body, and rush towards the ground with his whole body. After all, in addition to having the ability to fly in the air, Tun Yuanlong also has the ability to sneak in the sand. Therefore, Tun Yuanlong believes that as long as he is sneaking in the sand and his body rubs against the sand, no matter how hard Wenlong persists at this time, and it is absolutely impossible to continue to hang on to yourself. Are you going to dive into the sand again? Meow? Seeing the swallowing dragon suddenly lowering its height, Wenlong roughly guessed the intention of the swallowing dragon. However, Wenlong did not panic, but began to count down the time in his mind until Tun Yuanlong landed on the ground. 3, 2, 1. At the moment when Wenlong counted to 1, Tun Yuanlong happened to be in contact with the ground. And at the same moment, Wenlong jumped off the back of Tun Yuanlong as quickly as possible. Anyway, the purpose of delaying time has been achieved. There is no need to waste time with you anymore. Meow! After landing, Wenlong didn't stop, but immediately chased after Catherine and Hai Tang in the direction where they had escaped. At this time, Tun Yuanlong finally reacted, when he wanted to continue flying into the sky and chase Wenlong and others. Wenlong and his party had already run a considerable distance, and it was impossible to catch up in a short time. Ah! Tun Yuanlong roared angrily, although he saw Wenlong and others running away. Of course, Tun Yuanlong, who had been severely fooled, could not let Wenlong and others go. I saw the swallowing dragon flapping its huge fins, and the dust surrounding its body gathered again, and then its entire body flew into the sky again. Looking down from a distance, Tun Yuanlong could see Wenlong and others running ahead, so he quickly locked onto the traces of Wenlong and others, and Tun Yuanlong chased after them again. Wenlong and others ran as hard as they could, because Wenlong had bought precious time for Catherine and Hai Tang before. It seemed that Tun Yuanlong had been left behind by Wenlong and others in a short period of time. It doesn't pose much of a threat for the time being. However, this does not mean that Wenlong and others are no longer in danger. After all, Wenlong and others are still some distance away from the position built by the large army to hunt the Yuanyan dragon. If they want to avoid being overtaken by the Yuanyan dragon, they still have to do it. You have to run harder. Otherwise, even if you have gained some distance in the early stage, you may still be attacked by the Yuanyan dragon when its speed is dominant. Mr. Cat's abyss-devouring dragon is about to catch up again. Catherine ran, panting heavily. After all, the heavy armor Catherine wore was the most disadvantageous when running in the desert area. Although Catherine had thrown both big swords out to save Wenlong before, which reduced some of the weight and increased her speed, she was still the slowest among the three in comparison. Don't be discouraged. If you really don't have the strength, just take a strong pill. The position is right in front. Just hold on a little longer. Meow. In comparison, Wenlong's physical condition was not much better. After all, he was delaying time before. At that time, Wenlong was mainly attracting Tun Yuanlong's attention. So among the three, Wenlong had the largest amount of exercise. Only Hai Tang seemed to be more relaxed. However, facing the approaching swallowing dragon, Hai Tang also took on the important task of blocking the opponent with a hunting bow. From time to time, he had to turn around and use arrows to interfere with the flight path of the swallowing dragon. Although due to swallowing Yuanlong is surrounded by sand and dust, so the final effect is not obvious. But it is better than nothing. It is better than doing nothing. But even so, the Yuanyan dragon was approaching again. The sand and stones on the ground once again floated due to the suction of the Yuanyan dragon, and Wenlong and others could clearly feel the airflow flowing behind them. These constantly flowing airflows were like the wind blowing in front of them, giving Wenlong and others brought huge resistance. The closer Tun Yuanlong is, the greater the resistance of the wind will be, and the harder it will be for Wenlong and others to run, and the faster their speed will drop. Then, the distance between Tun Yuanlong and Wenlong and others will become closer. Quick! Then the wind got stronger again. Such a vicious cycle. Mr. Cat! Begonia! Hurry up! I can't hold on any longer. At this moment, Wenlong suddenly discovered that Hai Tang's body had begun to float. It turned out that after Wenlong returned to the form of a human body, the petite Hai Tang became the lightest one among the three, and therefore became the person most easily sucked up by the airflow. Once your feet leave the ground, you lose the point of stress. In this case, You cannot stabilize your body, and you will be sucked into the air by the Yuan dragon at a faster speed. Be careful, little girl. Seeing that Hai Tang was in danger, Wenlong immediately stretched out a hand to grab Hai Tang. But at this time Wenlong also felt a huge force pulling his body. And then Wenlong the dragon's body seemed to be pulled into the air together. Mr. Cat, hurry up! At this time, Catherine also noticed the abnormality of the two people. So Catherine also grabbed Wenlong. Under the pull of Catherine, who was wearing heavy armor, Wenlong and Catherine were slightly closer. It stabilized, and was not sucked into the air. However, the three of them also knew that this situation could not last long. As the Yuan dragon behind them got closer and closer, the suction force continued to increase. Then sooner or later Catherine will be sucked into the air together. Oops! I can't hold on much longer. We're still a few minutes away from the position. We're almost there. Naya! Looking at the swallowing dragon that was gradually approaching, Wenlong became more and more nervous. Because Wenlong knew that although his unexpected tactics had been successful before and delayed the swallowing dragon, it would be difficult to use such a method again, the second time. After all, Yin Yuanlong is not a fool. Once he is prepared for Wenlong's tactics, it will be difficult to succeed again. But just when Wenlong felt a headache as the Yuan dragon approached again, suddenly, from behind a sand dune ahead, a group of heavily armed hunters rushed over. Mr. Mingxin, Mr. Silver Lion, and Mr. Hidden Killer, we are here to help you. Oh, Wenlong saw that most of the people who came to help were hunters using long-range weapons. They were holding hunting bows or ballistae. And at this moment, they all aimed their weapons at Wenlong and others. The swallowing dragon behind the human body. Chapter 641 Restrained Bullet. Boom, boom, boom! Almost all the weapons fired at the same time. Although the arrows and ammunition fired by these hunters were not very powerful due to their lack of strength. Dozens of hunters using long-range weapons fired at the same time. The swallowing dragon was still very good. A barrage formed in front of him, effectively slowing down the Yuan dragon's flight speed. Oh meow! You are finally here! Seeing the arrival of reinforcements, Wenlong wiped his sweat and said, I'm very sorry, Mr. Mingxin, because the position has been harassed by other monsters before, so I couldn't escape for a while. Now the giant crossbow that fires restraint bombs has been installed, and President Lu Din and Captain Shisao are finally able to free their hands. We have come to defend you, so we have time to mobilize us to help you, said one of the hunters holding a crossbow. Humph. Those two old men know each other. Wenlong knew that such a barrage would not be able to stop the swallowing dragon for too long. So taking advantage of the short gap when the swallowing dragon was blocked, Wenlong, Catherine and Hai Tang did not dare to relax at all, but moved more desperately towards run ahead. Sure enough, in just a few seconds, the swallowing dragon had already broken through the barrage created by the ballista and bow hunter. Then Wenlong only heard the sound of a group of people retreating in panic. Retreat! Retreat! Time has been delayed. Now everyone retreats to the position. Huh? The swallowing dragon is not something you people can handle. But if you can help me delay for a few seconds, it is considered a meritorious service. I will remember your meow. Wenlong ran, thanking these people just now in his heart. Hunters who have bought themselves valuable time. After climbing over another sand dune, Wenlong and others could clearly see the giant ballista position ahead for hunting Yuanlong. In addition, there are hunters hiding around the ballista. In order not to alert the Yuan dragon, most of the hunters have already hidden themselves. Even the giant ballista on the ground was covered with a camouflage canvas that was close to the color of the desert. It's finally here. Meow. The moment he saw the formation, Wenlong also felt that his whole body had more strength. At this time, Wenlong continued to run until he reached the center of the entire formation. So here Wenlong, Catherine and Hai Tang, they all stopped. Except for Wenlong, Catherine and Hai Tang. The other hunters continued to run forward, then spread out and took cover separately. So at a glance, Wenlong, Catherine and Hai Tang were the only three people left in the entire position. It is these three people who attract the hatred of Tun Yuanlong the most. Come on! I really thought I was afraid of you. Meow! Wenlong didn't run away this time. Instead, he turned around and raised his middle finger at the Tun Yuanlong that was rushing towards him. Ah woo! The abyss-devouring dragon once again opened its huge, bottomless mouth like an abyss, and while sucking in a big breath, it rushed toward Wenlong and the others. The huge body of Tun Yuanlong fell from the sky. But at this moment Wenlong was confident and shouted loudly, Thou! Meow! In an instant, the canvas covering the 6 giant crossbows was instantly lifted, revealing the metal-colored crossbow bodies and the restraint bullets mounted on the giant crossbows. At this time, the sudden appearance of 6 strange mechanical devices on the ground also made Tun Yuanlong feel a little strange. But the 3 people who had teased him before were right in front of him, and it seemed that he could swallow them all in one gulp. So Tun Yuanlong doesn't care so much anymore. The previous failures made Tun Yuanlong only want to eliminate the 3 annoying humans in front of him as soon as possible. Therefore, although Tun Yuanlong felt something strange around him, he still did not change his mind about action, but continued to dive towards Wanlong and others. At the same moment, 6 roars were heard from all around the Yin Yuan dragon. Bang! 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 6 giant crossbow turrets fired restraint bullets at the same time. Different from ordinary artillery SH. LS. Restraint SH. LS look more like a large spear with a barb. But there is a long rope behind the spear, and this rope is connected to the base of the giant crossbow. At this time, because he wanted to swallow Wanlong and others, it was already too late when Tun Yuanlong noticed the 6 restraint bullets that were like large spears shot from the 6 giant crossbows. So, those 6 under the action of the powerful giant crossbow. The large spears invariably penetrated the dust shield surrounding the exterior of the swallowing dragon, and then pierced the carapace and scales on the outer layer of the swallowing dragon's body, and finally nailed it to the swallowing dragon, in the skin and flesh of Yuanlong. Crack! Once the restraining bullet pierced the outer carapace and scales of the swallowing dragon, the barb in front of the restraining bullet immediately got stuck into the skin and flesh of the swallowing dragon. At this time, it became difficult for the swallowing dragon to break free. Well done! All 6 shots hit. Meow! At this time, Wanlong also said happily in his heart, "Ah woo!" The swallowing dragon screamed in pain, and at the same time it shook its body violently, trying to shake off the 6 restraint bullets hanging on its body. But the result was in vain. Although these constraint bullets only damaged the skin after piercing the body of the Yuan dragon, and did not reach the level of damage to the muscles and bones. But if it were not for the consciousness of being torn off a piece of flesh by the barb on the bullet, it would not have been possible. It's possible to get rid of it. At this time, even the ancient dragon species Tun Yuanlong felt something was wrong, and struggled even harder. However, the pedestals of the 6 giant crossbows were firmly fixed to the ground, as if 6 huge stakes are nailed to the ground. Extremely strong. But even so, everyone could still hear the 6 giant crossbows constantly making click, 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 click sounds as they were pulled by the strange force of the Yuan dragon, which seemed to be under considerable pressure. Be careful not to let the Yuanlong escape. Hurry up and turn the winch together. Meow! After confirming that Tun Yuanlong had been restrained by 6 rounds of restraint bullets, Wanlong issued a second order to the surrounding crowd. At this time, almost all the hunters who were good at strength, including Shanlon Luodin, Lontong Zisa and Catherine, rushed towards the 6 giant ballistae around the Yuan dragon, and then began to work together to turn the 6 giant ballistae bases on the winch. Kaka! Ka! 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 Kaka! It took almost everyone's efforts to finally turn the winch with difficulty. Even though it is very difficult, you can still see that the winch is indeed rotating slowly. The winch is connected to the rope that restrains the tail of the bomb. As the winch rotates, the rope is further contracted. As for the Tun Yuanlong that is bound by the rope, it is also pulled down from the air by the rope. Chapter 642, The Falling Dry Sea Fierce God. Boom! The huge Yuan dragon that was floating in the air a few seconds ago finally fell to the ground. The rope of the restraining bomb was still embedded in the skin and flesh of Tuing Yuan dragon, and was pulled hard by the tightened rope. It not only bound the body of Tuing Yuan dragon, but also continuously conveyed the painful feeling to Tuing Yuan dragon. In mind, ah woo, this time, the painful sound made by the swallowing dragon was actually dragged from the air to the ground by humans. This made the swallowing dragon extremely angry, but also helpless. Each of the 6 strong ropes is as thick as an adult man's wrist, and they are all made of extremely strong elite spider silk as raw materials. They have been processed by Major Bolton's best blacksmiths, and their strength is extremely high, far superior to any known rope. Therefore, no matter how powerful the abyss-devouring dragon is, it cannot easily break free in a short period of time, and every time it struggled Tun Yuanlong had to endure the severe pain caused by the barb at the warhead of the restraint bullet sliding back and forth in the flesh. Not only that, at the moment when the swallowing dragon fell to the ground, the sand and dust that originally surrounded the swallowing dragon instantly dissipated due to the violent vibration after falling to the ground, causing the body of the swallowing dragon to be completely exposed. Without the dust surrounding it, it could no longer fly in the air as unscrupulously as before. At this moment, the huge Yin dragon was like a fish lying on the chopping board, showing itself ready to be slaughtered. Go ahead. I have been preparing for this for so long, and I must not let this opportunity pass me by. All members, attack! Seeing that the Yuan dragon had landed, Shanlan Luodin and Longtong Zaisa also issued orders for all hunters to attack together. Ah! At this time, the hunters who had been waiting for a long time immediately rushed out from the surrounding bunkers, then picked up their weapons and rushed towards the Yuan dragon together. Ah Wu! The swallowing dragon roared again, and kept twisting its body. While turning violently, it also stirred up a lot of sand and dust around it, making it difficult for people to get close. Don't be afraid. It has already fallen from the sky. At this time, the first few hunters who rushed to the side of the swallowing dragon had already raised their weapons and slashed at the swallowing dragon. However, at this moment, the swallowing dragon raised the huge fin on one side of its body and then snapped it violently. Bang! As a large amount of sand and dust were suddenly blown up by the huge fins of the Yuanlong. The hunters who rushed up first were blown away like ants being blown away by the huge palm. TCH, don't come out and join in the fun if you don't have enough strength. Just use long-range weapons to support me. Unlike those hunters who were directly slapped away, the moment when Yuanlong raised its huge fins, Wenlong then lowered his body in time to reduce the impact of the airflow on his body as much as possible. At the same time, he inserted the two knives in his hands into the sand to help fix his body. So, when the dust receded, Wenlong still stood firmly on the spot. No big deal. In addition to Wenlong, Haitang also used his dexterous body skills to avoid the counterattack of Tun Yuanlong, and went directly to the side and rear of Tun Yuanlong. As for Shanlan Luodin and Longtong Zaisa, they used large the sword and shield withstood the sand and dust raised by the swallowing dragon, and rushed to the side of the swallowing dragon. Among all the legendary hunters, only Catherine remained behind. After all, when trying to save Wenlong, Catherine had already lost her weapon. At this time, she was unable to launch an attack. If she used someone else's weapon, it would not be able to exert its maximum effect. This made Catherine want to work side by side with Wenlong fighting, but had to stay aside and watch Wenlong and others rush forward. Ah, I really want to fight with Mr. Cat, Catherine said to herself, standing alone in the back. At this time, Wenlong had already rushed to Tun Yuanlong's side first. Wenlong in human form also has the bonus of Elu Cat's backward formation, and also activates Elu Cat's attack technique, Elu Cat's defense technique, Ghost human transformation, and other skills, and taking various body strengthening medicines such as force moving medicine, ghost medicine, and hardening medicine. It can be said that Wenlong at this time has reached the limit in terms of strength, speed, and physical strength. So when Wenlong approached Tun Yuanlong didn't even have time to make any further reaction. Then Wenlong's figure suddenly disappeared from sight. Mysterious truth! Across the world! Then in just an instant, only the red and black sword light enveloped the body of Tun Yuanlong. That's right. It's the body that envelopes the huge Yuan swallowing dragon. Because Wenlong's speed was so fast. In just a split second, Wenlong launched a fierce attack around the body of Tun Yuanlong that could not be caught by the naked eye. From the belly of the dragon to the back of the dragon. From the head of the dragon to the tail of the dragon. Although Wenlong cannot be seen, the red and black sword light can be seen constantly shining. The deep scars left on the body of Tun Yuanlong after the sword light passed by. It's such a terrifying power. The sword light it wields can actually envelop the entire Yin dragon. Nowadays, young people will reveal secrets whenever they disagree. Shanlan Luodin, who was still lagging behind, also sighed. But you won't be left behind. At this time, Shanlan Luodin also raised the two big swords in his hands, and then slashed towards the Yuan dragon. Crack! Crack! Both big swords pierced deeply into the body of Yin Yuanlong. And then Shanlan Luodin also activated the secret again. Mystery! Gate of Hell! The scene of Shanlan Luodin using two big swords to activate the mysteries at the same time appeared again. The two big swords rotated, constantly tearing apart the body of the swallowing dragon, and once again rolled up a tornado of blood. Ha! Sweetie, it's all thanks to the secret medicine you provided. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to regain my glory so quickly. Shanlan Luodin shouted excitedly while activating the secret. At this time, Dragon Eyes Caesar finally followed up. But unlike Shanlan Luodin, Dragon Eyes Caesar did not use mysteries this time, but used a skill with one level lower destructive power. Dragon Cannon! Fire! I saw a dragon pupil. She saw put the gun in his hand against the chin of the Yuan dragon, and then activated the skill. Boom! There was a loud noise, and a large amount of flames burst out from the muzzle of the gun. Although the power was quite amazing, it was somewhat insufficient compared to the powerful secret. Therefore, although Longtong Shisha's blow barely broke the carapace on the head of the Yuan dragon, it did not cause any further damage. On the contrary, Dragon Eye Caesar himself took 2 steps back due to the reaction force caused by the dragon cannon. Chapter 643 The Broken Rope. Woohoo! After launching the dragon cannon, Longtong Zysa panted, and there were a lot of sweat beads on his forehead. At this time, Shanlan Luodin also discovered the abnormality of Shisa with dragon pupil, and asked, Hey, sweet Shisa, what's wrong with you? Could it be that? Shut up! Longtong Shisa scolded. Don't hide it. In fact, you only had 3 bottles of secret medicine at that time. One was given to me, and the other 2 were given to the 2 girls, but you didn't use them yourself? Shanlan Luodin said loudly. I don't need this kind of thing like you do. Longtong Zysa also said loudly. Stop being brave. Your body hasn't recovered yet, so you can't continue fighting? Shanlan Luodin shouted anxiously. However, at this moment, the huge swallowing dragon raised its huge fin again, and then slammed it down. Bang! This time, the target of the Yan Yuan Long was the Dragon Eyes Caesar in front of him. And uncharacteristically, this time, the Dragon Eyes Caesar's dodge was much slower than usual. After all, the previous battle with the crab had consumed too much of Dragon Eyes Caesar's energy, and he did not receive enough replenishment afterwards. Now after launching the dragon cannon, Dragon Eyes Caesar felt even more tired. Battles are often decided in an instant. Although Longtong Zysa was only half a beat slow due to lack of physical strength, it also became a fatal flaw. Therefore, when the huge fin of the swallowing dragon was shot down, Longtong Shisa couldn't dodge, so he could only defend himself with a square shield in his hand. However, he was knocked to the ground by the overwhelming power of the Yuan dragon. Boom! The huge dust was kicked up again, and at the same time, the hunters who gathered around to support Longtong Zysa were also blown away to a long distance by the dust. Hoo ho 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 ho! Caesar, the leader of the Wanli hunting group with the title of Dragon Eyes, and one of the legendary hunters of Major Bull 10, spat out large chunks of blood from his mouth at this moment. This is a sign that the internal organs of the body are injured. It can be seen that the force of the seemingly ordinary blow of the swallowing dragon has passed through the heavy armor worn by Longtong Zysa and passed to the inside of Longtong Zysa's body. However, the swallowing dragon did not stop there. Seeing that the human holding a gun and a square shield had fallen to the ground, the swallowing dragon raised its huge fin again. This time, Tan Yuanlong made this move with full of anger. As a legendary ancient dragon species, Tan Yuanlong, known as the fierce god of the dry sea, has never encountered such a situation today. Not only was it restrained from the air to the ground by a group of humans using strange mechanical devices, but it was also used by humans to the weapon left countless wounds on the body. And he tasted unprecedented pain, which made the swallowing dragon extremely angry. Therefore, this blow to Longtong Shisha, who fell on the ground, was Tan Yuanlong venting all the anger he had accumulated before. It seemed like an ordinary blow, but it was actually Tan Yuanlong using all his strength to vent his anger. A terrifying killing move. Caesar! Seeing the dragon pupil Shisa being knocked to the ground, and the swallowing dragon once again aiming at Shisa and pressing down its huge fins, Shanlan Luodin became completely angry. He stepped forward and raised his hand. The 2 big swords in Chi-Chi's hands blocked the front of Longtong Shisa. At this time, there was a sharp contrast between the tiny humans and the huge Yuan dragon. Boom! Around Shanlan Luodin, the sky-high dust suddenly erupted. Shanlan Luodin resisted the all-out attack of the Yin Yuan dragon by himself. However, the power of the Yin Yuan dragon was too great. The moment he withstood the huge power, Shanlan Luodin also felt his body moving. It sank, and then the ground collapsed with it. So for a moment, Shanlan Luodin also lost his balance. And then, the overwhelming power of Tun Yuanlong completely overwhelmed him. The result was that after a loud noise, Shanlan Luodin also fell to the ground. You idiot! You should have taken the opportunity to kill Tun Yuanlong twice instead of coming to save me. At this time, seeing Shanlan Luodin falling beside him, Longtong Zaisa also said with difficulty, Those who give away precious secret medicine to others and force themselves are not much better. Snort. Huh. Oh no! This guy still has such great power. Meow. At this time, Wenlong also saw everything in front of him. When Shanlan Luodin and Longtong Zaisa fell one after another, Wenlong also deeply felt that as an ancient dragon species, the vitality of the swallowing dragon is powerful. At the same time, the swallowing dragon struggled again, its huge body twisting repeatedly, and every rotation brought great vibrations to the earth. Then, there was another click sound, and it turned out that one of the 6 ropes restraining the swallowing dragon broke because it could not withstand the huge pulling force. Although after turning into a human form, he used drugs and various skills to increase his physical abilities to the maximum. Wenlong still did not have the confidence to completely kill the Yuanyan dragon in a short time. According to Wenlong's estimation, as long as there is enough time, there will be no problem even if he kills the Yuanyan dragon alone. Because for Wenlong at this time, the transformation time has been extended, and Tun Yuanlong can't even keep up with his dodge speed, as Wenlong leaves more and more wounds on Tun Yuanlong's body. After a certain period of time, Yin Yuanlong will eventually be defeated by Wenlong. But what Wenlong lacks now is time, because Wenlong had foreseen that soon, Yin Yuanlong would break free from the restrained bullets, then summon the dust shield covering his whole body again, and fly into the sky again. If Tun Yuanlong wants to retreat by then, Wenlong will have no way to pursue it, but will have to watch the efforts made for this hunt go to waste. After all, one of the 6 ropes binding the Yuanyan dragon has been torn off, which means that the power of the Yuanyan dragon needs to be borne by the remaining 5 ropes. And the force on each rope will also increase at any time. The more the force increases, the easier it is for the rope to be broken. And the more the rope is broken, the greater the force each rope needs to withstand. Therefore, it is not difficult to deduce that starting from the break of the first rope, the next 5 ropes will be broken at a faster speed. And the fact was exactly as Wenlong expected. After the first rope broke, soon there was a cracking sound from the second rope. And then Wenlong saw that the second rope also completely broke, eventually scattered to the side. Chapter 644 Injured Palm. Probably feeling that the restraint force of the rope on the body is weakening, the struggle of the swallowing dragon has become more and more intense. Even Wenlong can only approach the swallowing dragon cautiously to avoid being constantly beaten by the swallowing dragon. The destructive force caused by the rolling body spread. These 2 old men actually fell down together. This attack is not enough. With the damage caused by me and the little girl, I'm afraid that before I can kill the abyss-swallowing dragon, the opponent will break free from the rope and run away. Meow. Wenlong also thought anxiously in his heart. At the same time, Wenlong also thought of Catherine. It would be great if Catherine had a weapon in her hand. Then, there would be no insufficient damage. Meow. But at this moment, Wenlong suddenly saw Catherine running towards Tun Yuanlong, and she was holding 2 big swords in her hands. Mr. Cat, I'm coming. When she rushed over, Catherine shouted loudly, and at the same time brandished the 2 swords in her hands and slashed at the Yuanyan dragon. Bang! However, with 2 loud noises, the huge force shook Catherine back several steps, and the sword in her hand failed to break through the Yuanyan dragon's carapace. It's useless. It's not your own weapon. It cannot exert its full power. If you use it reluctantly, you will be easily injured. Meow. Wenlong also warned loudly. It turned out that in desperation, Catherine, who rushed over, picked up Shanlan Luodin's sword. Originally, the 2 big swords in Shanlan Luodin's hands were also high-level powerful weapons, with weapon levels exceeding level 80. It can be said that there is no problem in breaking through the carapace of the Yuanyan dragon. However, because the monster souls in the weapons were not hunted by Catherine. Because of this, the power that Catherine finally exerted was less than 30% of the original power of the weapon. Therefore, the weapon that could have broken through the Yuanyan dragon's carapace bounced back in Catherine's hands. Not only did it not cause much damage to the Yuanyan dragon, but the huge reaction force almost caused Catherine to fall to the ground. However, Catherine still had no intention of stopping. After the big sword was deflected, Catherine adjusted her body posture again, took a long step forward, and began to accumulate strength. 1, 2, 3. When Catherine shouted 3, the big sword that had completed 3 stages of charging struck the huge body of the Yuanyuan dragon again. After 3 stages of charging, the attack was obviously more violent than before, as if it had a mighty force. The 2 heavy swords slashed at the Yuanyuan dragon at extremely fast speeds with a huge sense of oppression. Boom! Boom! This time, after 3 stages of charging, the 2 swords finally left 2 scratches on the Yuanyuan dragon's carapace, but they were unable to cause any further damage. However, a more violent attack also means a more powerful reaction force. Under the influence of almost the same powerful reaction force, this time the 2 swords in Catherine's hands were bounced away due to the reaction force. After the big sword in her hand was bounced away, Catherine felt a stream of heat gushing out of her palm. It was the shock that had just caused the wound on the palm of her hand, and blood flowed out. This idiot. Do you think you can create miracles just by relying on brute force? Wenlong saw all this and was very anxious in his heart. On the one hand, Wenlong felt sorry for Catherine's self-destructive attack. On the other hand, Wenlong also felt more and more that the ropes binding the Yuanyuan dragon were about to burst. Snapped. Sure enough, Wenlong just had a premonition in his heart that another rope was completely broken. Only 3 ropes left. Meow. Seeing that only half of the original 6 ropes were left, the Yuanyuanlong's counterattack became more and more fierce. While struggling violently, Tan Yuanlong could even devote part of his energy to manipulating the nearby sand and dust to deal with Wenlong. In order to cope with Tan Yuanyuan's counterattack, Wenlong had to restrain his attacks. There was no way. Use all your attack capabilities. In this case, will this Yuanyuan dragon really escape? Meow. Wenlong seemed to have foreseen the situation when the Yuanyuan dragon escaped. Although it is not a shameful thing to be escaped by an ancient dragon species like Yan Yuanlong, it is still difficult for Wenlong to accept that he has put so much effort into hunting gain nothing. No, we can't just let the Yuanyuan dragon escape like this. As long as I attack more, it should still be possible to prevent the Yuanyuan dragon from escaping. Wenlong thought in his heart. With this idea in mind, Wenlong simply jumped in front of Tun Yuanlong this time, and then used the double swords in his hands, Dragon Sealing Sword, Jinjua Sect, to directly attack Tun Yuanlong's head. The head of the Swallowing Dragon is also the weak point of the Swallowing Dragon. At this time, using more violent attacks to attack the head of the Swallowing Dragon is the best way to cause more damage in a short period of time. But correspondingly, Wenlong must also take more risks. But at this time, Wenlong could no longer care about so much. In order to completely kill Tun Yuanlong, Wenlong decided to take this risk. Little girl, cover me. Meow. While directly attacking the head of Tun Yuanlong, Wenlong also gave instructions to Haitang behind him. Mysterious meaning. Kill the first line. At this time, Haitang finally used his secret meaning again. This is the second time Haitang has used the secret. For Haitang, using the secret twice in a row is undoubtedly very physically demanding. After Haitang sensed Wenlong's intention. In order to cooperate with Wenlong, fight the dragon and launch an attack with all your strength. Sure enough this time, Haitang's secret hit the Swallowing Dragon's head accurately, and left a deep blood mark on the jaw of the Swallowing Dragon. However, after firing this secret weapon, Haitang, who had already exhausted too much energy before, was finally exhausted and could no longer activate the powerful secret weapon. That's great, little girl. Meow. When he saw a deep wound cut by Haitang on the lower jaw of the Swallowing Dragon, Wenlong felt extremely relieved, and immediately thought of a way to quickly kill the Swallowing Dragon, which was to directly attack the wound left by Haitang. That wound! Originally, the head of Yan Yuanlong was the weak point, but now Haitang used mysteries to break the gap. If Wenlong could use the double swords in his hands, Sealing Dragon Sword, True Ju Sect, to directly aim at the wound opened by Haitang. If he launches an attack, Wenlong will have a way to make the damage from his 2 swords penetrate deep into the brain of the Swallowing Dragon. In that case, there will be no way to kill the Swallowing Dragon on the spot, but it will be enough to delay the Swallowing Dragon's action of breaking free from the rope. Chapter 645 My Big Sword. Then, just attack the wound directly. Meow. The next moment, this idea flashed through Wenlong's mind. Wenlong, who was still on the side of Tun Yuanlong, appeared directly in front of Tun Yuanlong like a ghost that suddenly appeared. And at the same time as he appeared, The double swords in Wenlong's hands also stabbed out instantly. The speed is still jaw-dropping. Crack. Crack. Wenlong indeed did it. Wenlong, who was standing directly in front of Tun Yuanlong, stabbed the two knives in his hands through the wound left by Hai Tang before Tun Yuanlong could react. And then the red and black dragon attribute damage burst out from the two swords and began to erode the Yuanyan dragon's head violently. Ah Wu. The pain at this moment drove Tun Yuanlong crazy even more than before. Watching the wound on his head gradually expand under the erosion of the dragon attribute, Wenlong also felt a glimmer of hope of victory. With just 2 more strikes, I will be able to completely stop the abyss-devouring dragon from escaping. Meow. Suddenly, Wenlong had a new idea in his mind. So Wenlong, who was supposed to dodge immediately after the attack, failed to dodge in time this time. Instead, he pulled out the 2 knives from the wound on the Tun Yuanlong's jaw, launched a new attack again. Ghosts danced wildly. But in the blink of an eye, more and faster red and black sword lights were slashed at the head of the swallowing dragon. According to Wenlong's idea, as long as all these sword lights hit the previous wounds, even the Tuan Yuan dragon, an ancient dragon species, would definitely not be able to sustain it. Even if it was not killed, it would at least be seriously injured and lost. Possibility of escape. Go to HL. Meow. The sword light was released, but beyond Wenlong's expectation. Tun Yuanlong's counterattack at this moment turned out to be much faster than before. Just when Wenlong's sword light had just been swung out, the head of Tun Yuanlong also moved rapidly. It swung up and swept towards Wenlong with its flat jaw. But this time Wenlong couldn't avoid it, because when Wenlong launched the ghost dance, there would be a short period of stiffness, resulting in the temporary inability to move the body. And Tun Yuanlong seemed to be waiting for this flaw, and launched a counterattack against Wenlong at the most appropriate time. Has this guy seen through my moves? At this moment, Wenlong suddenly realized that he had made a mistake. Although this was a low-level mistake that he would never make in normal times, because he wanted to prevent Tun Yuanlong from escaping. The impatient Wenlong was greedy for the knife, and the other party caught the flaw. Bang! It was the swallowing dragon's jaw that hit Wenlong's body. In an instant, Wenlong felt a sharp pain. It felt like he was hit by a huge hammer. If it were not for the protection of the armor, it would not be an exaggeration to say that his entire spine was broken. Immediately afterwards, Wenlong's body was pushed directly into the air by the arrogant power of Tun Yuanlong. Then Wenlong, who had been knocked into the air, heard another loud noise. Wenlong knew that it was the sound of another rope being broken free. This also means that there are only 2 ropes left on Tun Yuanlong's body. Bang! In the end, Wenlong fell heavily to the ground. Although Wenlong could barely stand up because his physical ability had been improved to the extreme, Wenlong knew that it was impossible for him to stop Tun Yuanlong now. After all, Wenlong, who was knocked away, was already quite far away from the swallowing dragon. And it was not easy for Wenlong to speed up and approach the swallowing dragon again and launch an effective attack again, especially when time is urgent. Once the last 2 ropes are broken free by the Yin Yuan dragon, this dry sea fierce god will fly into the sky again, under the protection of the sandstorm. No one can stop the Yin Yuan dragon. Once the ancient dragon species that can cause huge natural disasters approaches the city, even if it does nothing, it will bring huge damage to the city. What's more, judging from the trajectory of the swallowing dragon, this time the swallowing dragon is aimed at if we go to the city of Major Boltan. It is hard to estimate how much disaster it will cause. Didn't you seize the last chance? Wenlong thought with some disappointment in his heart. However, Wenlong, who was focusing all his attention on Tun Yuanlong at this time, did not notice that during the time when he, Hai Tang and Tun Yuanlong were entangled, another figure appeared on the battlefield. Sister, I brought you the things you lost. You must be in need of them now. Appearing behind Catherine was Rin, standing on a sand dune, sweating profusely, and in Rin's hands were Catherine's 2 supersized swords made of Tyrannosaurus materials. It turned out that after Catherine threw the big sword to save Wenlong, she was chased by the Yuanyan dragon, so she had no time to retrieve her big sword. Before, Rin, who knew that she was not strong enough to help, had been hiding in while watching the battle, and happened to see the scene. He waited for Tun Yuanlong to chase Wenlong and others away, and then picked up the 2 big swords left by Catherine. However, because the weight of these 2 big swords has exceeded the limit that Rin can carry, Rin cannot carry the big swords on his back like Catherine, but can only drag these 2 big swords in the desert with difficulty. Walking in, it is precisely for this reason that Rin did not come to Catherine until now. Cold! Catherine, who had always suffered from having no weapons, was also extremely surprised. She immediately turned around and ran to Rin's side in a few steps. She took the two familiar swords from Rin's hands, and then rushed towards the Yuan dragon. Rin! Thank you! You're welcome! Wani-sama! After saying this, Rin collapsed on the ground from exhaustion. Those two big swords were so heavy that even just dragging them around took up all Rin's energy. However, when Rin saw Catherine holding two big swords and still able to walk like flying, Rin also smiled happily. You are indeed a sister! Bang! Bang! Unlike before, this time there were two consecutive loud noises. Not long after Catherine took over her two big swords, the two ropes that finally bound the Yuan dragon were broken almost at the same time. Ah woo! The swallowing dragon finally broke free and made an incredible sound again. Around the swallowing dragon, the sandstorm began to emerge again, and the huge body began to rise slowly like a heated hot air balloon. Wenlong, who was struggling to stand up, had no time to approach Tun Yuanlong again. As for other hunters in the guild and hunting group, although they also used long-range weapons to attack, due to lack of strength, many of them were unable to penetrate the surroundings of Tun Yuanlong. Due to sand and dust protection, even penetrating attacks will be weakened by sand and dust, resulting in a sharp reduction in power. They will not cause much damage, and they will not be able to hinder the actions of the abyss-devouring dragon at all. Chapter 646, Advance or Retreat at Will. So all the hunters present could only watch helplessly as this huge swallowing dragon flapped its long fins and began to fly into the air. Give! Me! Get off! Come! Suddenly, Catherine appears, wearing heavy armor made of Tyrannosaurus materials. Catherine forcibly rushed into the sand and dust surrounding the body of the swallowing dragon. She did not care about the large amount of sand hitting her body. Against the raging sandstorm, Catherine raised the big sword in his hand. At this moment, Catherine, who had difficulty moving in the desert because of wearing heavy armor, now became the only hunter who could forcefully break through the sand and dust around the abyss-eating dragon. Just when the body of the swallowing dragon began to float, Catherine appeared behind the swallowing dragon. Catherine, holding two big swords, put the two swords together and then made a giant sword. Finally, he slashed at the tail of the swallowing dragon that was still on the ground. Crack! The Tyrannosaurus greatsword, which is heavier and larger than ordinary great swords, appears bulkier, but its destructive power is the most astonishing among all the hunters present. At this moment, Catherine, who had strange strength, chopped it down with great force. She undoubtedly maximized the power of the weapon, so she easily broke through the carapace and scales of the Yuan dragon, and then cut into the tail of the dragon. Open a deep wound. At this time, the swallowing dragon, whose body had just floated, twisted its entire body due to the severe pain from its tail, and the movement that was about to fly into the air was briefly stagnant in the air. Oh! That's great! Meow! Seeing that Catherine actually prevented the Yuan from escaping, Wenlong certainly would not let go of this golden opportunity, even if it was only for a short time. It was enough for Wenlong. While Wenlong continued to rush towards Tun Yuanlong, he secretly began to accumulate strength and adjusted the position of holding the double sword. Sealing Dragon Sword, Shinju Sect, with both hands. This is Wenlong's preparation for launching new skills. After all, Wenlong now fights in human form and has better strength and physical strength than before. In this case, Wenlong is also able to activate the skills he used in Elu, skills that cannot be activated in cat form. For example, the new secret that Wenlong is preparing to launch now. Mysterious Truth! Advance or retreat according to your will! The moment Wenlong roared, the two swords had already spun out of Wenlong's hands. The target is the huge gap that Catherine just broke in the tail of the Yuan dragon. The two, Sealing Dragon Sword, Shinju Yamen, thrown by Wenlong rotated like two fast-rotating propellers, while flying in the air at high speed. The blades also rotated at an extremely fast speed, which greatly increased the cutting power of the weapon. Therefore, when the Sealing Dragon Sword, Shinju Sect, came into contact with the tail of the Yin Yuan dragon, all one could see was that the flesh and blood of the Yin Yuan dragon was easily cut open by the rotating double knives. And as the weapons rotated, in fact, it means that the blade continuously cuts the same part of the body of the swallowing dragon in a very short period of time, thereby quickly deepening the wound. In addition, the deep wound that Catherine had left before had reached as deep as the bone. So under Wenlong's new mystery attack again, the tail of the Yuan dragon was finally sealed by the double swords thrown by Wenlong. Dragon sword was completely cut into 2 pieces. Blood spurted out like a column. At this time, even the swallowing dragon finally couldn't hold on. And the body that had just floated fell from the air again. Boom! This time compared with before. Although there was no constraint from restraining bullets, it was really difficult for the swallowing dragon whose tail was cut off to fly. And as soon as he landed, Wenlong and Catherine had already gathered around him. As for the double swords, Dragon Sealing Sword, Jinjua Yaimen, thrown by Wenlong, after completely cutting off the tail of the Yin Yuan dragon, it started to reverse direction with the help of its own rotational force like a thrown boomerang. Flying, as its name suggests, advances and retreats according to one's will. After being thrown out, it quickly returned to Wenlong's side. Even in the face of the high-speed flying blade, Wenlong jumped lightly, easily stretched out his hands, and accurately grasped the handle of the knife, and caught the flying knives. Okay, what a powerful secret. It actually cut off the tail of the ancient dragon species. That's because the silver lion sword has already cut a big hole in the tail of the Yuanyuan dragon. Otherwise, how could it be possible to cut off the tail of the Yuanyuan dragon like this? In short, both of them are very powerful. No, I should say 3. And the child who uses the hunting bow. Although she seems to have exhausted her physical strength, she is so young that she has activated 2 mysteries in a row in one battle. The hunters watching from behind were also shocked by this wonderful performance. Although they rushed out immediately when they saw the swallowing dragon falling to the ground again. They already knew in their hearts that it was no longer their turn to perform at this time. So this time, Wenlong and Catherine aimed at the same position again, which was the head of the Yin Yuan dragon. On the head of Tun Yuanlong, there is a wound left by Haitang. In the same position, there are traces left by the erosion of the dragon attribute damage on Wenlong's Sealing Dragon Sword, Jinjua Sect. That is the weakness of the swallowing dragon, and it has been attacked twice in a short period of time. Not only has the wound not healed, but the hard skull has been broken, and it can no longer protect the head of the swallowing dragon. Therefore, when Wenlong and Catherine both aimed their weapons at the wound on Tun Yuanlong's head, Tun Yuanlong also felt an ominous premonition. Just like many creatures have a bad premonition when facing a life and death crisis, Tun Yuanlong also felt it at this moment. So at this last moment, Tun Yuanlong raised its big fin again and moved towards Wenlong and Catherine. Photographed it. Bang! The huge fins of the swallowing dragon hit the sand, and a large amount of sand and dust was stirred up in an instant. All hunters who were approaching were blown away by the violent sand and dust and fell to the side. Some of them were even seriously injured and fell to the side. I couldn't even stand up from the ground. However, Catherine and Wenlong were safe and sound, even though the main purpose of Tun Yuanlong was to prevent Catherine and Wenlong from approaching him. All the dust raised was blocked by the sword in Catherine's hand. The broad sword formed by 2 large swords perfectly protected Catherine and Wenlong, who took the opportunity to hide behind Catherine. This made Tun Yuanlong even more aware of the terrifying nature of the 2 people in front of him. So Tun Yuanlong once again raised its huge fin, preparing to launch another attack, completely intercepting Wenlong and Catherine, making a death struggle. However, this time, Tun Yuanlong did not expect that he was actually just sending part of his body to Catherine's sword again. Chapter 647 Bold Tactics. This time Catherine's defense was different from before. As a user of a big sword, the normal defensive posture is to hold the big sword diagonally sideways to block the opponent's attack. However, this time, Catherine stuck the big sword vertically on the ground for defense. And after the defense, Catherine did not immediately lift the defense. Instead, she clearly saw red light appearing on Catherine's sword and around her body. Obviously, this was not a scene that ordinary defense could cause. Rather, it is quite similar to the secret technique used by Shanlan Lu Din when he fought the crab. When did this woman learn this trick? Isn't it a trick that only President Roden can do? Many people present were shocked by the power shown by Catherine, especially when they saw the red light gathering around Catherine's body. People are more sure that they have not seen it wrong. Catherine was not just defending, but actually used the second secret that only Shanlan Lu Din had mastered before. Mysterious meaning. Styx rushes. Catherine, who had never used this move before, actually skillfully performed the same move as Shanlan Roden. In addition to Catherine's own talent, the most important thing was Wenlong's on-site guidance behind Catherine, having witnessed the entire process of Shanlan Lu Din using mystery Styx Chone, plus Wenlong explaining some key points that needed attention on the spot. Catherine understood the entire mystery in a very short period of time with her own talent. Of course, this kind of breeding is also indispensable for the experience and skills accumulated through continuous hunting. At this moment, they are all integrated and help Catherine complete the entire secret. So, when Catherine completely blocked the large amount of sand and dust raised by the Yuan dragon, Catherine's accumulated power finally reached the maximum. Then Catherine held a big sword in her hand and slashed towards the jaw of the Yuan dragon with a slash. Ah! Crack! The supersized Tyrannosaurus sword, which was made up of two big swords, gleamed with red light, and slashed towards the jaw of the Yuan dragon like a devastating blow. Then there was only a loud sound. And according to the original solidity of the Yuan dragon, the lower jaw was finally completely broken under Catherine's full attack. This time it wasn't just a wound, but a whole piece of carapace was completely shaved off, completely exposing the soft muscles inside, in addition to the wound left by Wenlong and Haitang on the lower jaw of Tun Yuanlong. At this moment, there was almost no defense in the lower jaw of Tun Yuanlong. Ah Wu! The painful Yuan dragon also roared loudly. Feeling the danger coming, the Yuan dragon, which could not fly for the time being, prepared to dive into the ground again. However, because the hard carapace of its lower jaw, which was usually used for digging soil, had been broken, it is not so easy for the swallowing dragon to dive into the sand again. Therefore, the swallowing dragon whose movements became sluggish left Wenlong with an excellent opportunity to attack. Just when the swallowing dragon was about to dive into the ground again, Wenlong once again launched the secret. Mysterious truth! Across the world! Wenlong once again increased his speed to the extreme. And then the two swords in his hand slashed towards the jaw of the swallowing dragon with a dazzling light. This is the third time that Wenlong has activated a secret skill in this day. For many hunters, a secret skill is a skill that cannot be mastered in a lifetime. Even if they master the secret skill, the physical consumption of the secret skill is huge when it is activated. For most hunters, being able to activate it once a day is already the limit. Only legendary hunters like Shanlan Luodin and Longtong Zaisa can surpass the limits of ordinary people and activate mysteries twice in one day. It can be said that they are unusually powerful. But now Wenlong has done its time to activate the third secret in one day. Undoubtedly, this is the result of combining Elu Cat's abilities and human physical fitness. Using a human body to enjoy the powerful increase in Elu Cat's skills at the same time allowed Wenlong to truly break through the limits of the human body and reach a level never before seen by humans. The height has never been higher. Therefore, when Wenlong activated the secret for the third time, everyone around him looked at the scene in disbelief, completely unable to believe that Wenlong could do such a thing. However, Wenlong did indeed use the secret for the third time. And what was even more incredible was that the third secret was even more powerful than the first two. Because this is Wenlong's desperate attack. Just to completely obliterate this huge ancient dragon species, before the swallowing dragon dives into the ground again. Countless sword lights struck at the completely unprotected lower jaw of the swallowing dragon. Under the shroud of the sword light, the jaw of the swallowing dragon was completely cut open. And Wenlong also rushed directly into the swallowing dragon like a bullet, in the lower jaw of the swallowing dragon, and then continued to attack from the lower jaw of the swallowing dragon, from bottom to top. The whole body was surrounded by countless sword lights, reaching directly to the upper jaw of the swallowing dragon. At this time, because Wenlong had already passed through the jaw of Tun Yuanlong and entered into the mouth of Tun Yuanlong, others could no longer see Wenlong's figure, and could only see Tun Yuan rolling in pain. A large amount of blood flowed from the dragon's mouth, showing that this terrifying ancient dragon species was suffering from extraordinary pain at this time. Has this entered the mouth of the Yuan dragon? Aren't you afraid of being bitten to death by the Yuan dragon? Someone couldn't help but say. Probably not. If it penetrates directly through the lower jaw and enters the mouth of the Yuan, it will not pass through the teeth at all. Anyway, this approach is too bold. He rushed into the mouth of the Yuan dragon himself. Even if he was not bitten by the teeth, he would probably be swallowed directly into the stomach by the Yuan dragon and digested. Don't worry. It won't happen. At this time, a rich voice interrupted people's argument. Only then did people realize that the person who said this was Shanlan Luodin, who had finally stood up, after being knocked down by the Yuan dragon before. Shanlan Luodin and Longtong Zaisa were both sent to the back of the battlefield by the Elu Cat rescue team. It was only now that they recovered a little from their wounds under the treatment of medicine and stood up again. At this time, Shanlan Luodin said again, As long as you use 2 knives to pierce the mouth of the swallowing dragon, it will be like a fish bone stuck in the throat, making it impossible for the opponent to swallow or spit it out. Not only that, but it can also continue to use weapons to cause damage to the Yuan dragon. But the Yuan dragon is at a loss what to do. After Shanlan Luodin finished speaking, Lontong Zaisa, who also stood up reluctantly, also added, "It is indeed an amazing tactic that not only requires skills, but also enough courage. There is probably no one except him who can do it." The words of Shanlan Luodin and Lontong Zaisa also attracted the echo of others around them, and therefore all the hunters present became more and more admiring of Wenlong's strength. Chapter 648 New Legend. At this time, people could only watch the swallowing dragon struggling in pain from a distance, and did not dare to get close at all. Because in this case, if you are not careful, you may be injured by the swallowing dragon that is constantly struggling in severe pain. The swallowing dragon is twisting its body crazily and waving its huge fins, causing a wave of chaos around it. Countless desert tornadoes and sandstorms make it even more difficult to stop. Therefore, except for hunters who use long-range weapons, who can occasionally provide support, most hunters who use melee weapons choose to retreat to a farther place and quietly watch the scene in front of them. The powerful Tuanyuan dragon kept twisting its body like this, and blood continued to flow out from the mouth of Tuanyuan dragon and the wound on its lower jaw, showing that Wenlong was constantly using his 2 knives in the mouth of Tuanyuan dragon, create new wounds. During this period, Tuanyuan also tried to swallow a large amount of sand, hoping to use the sand to squeeze Wenlong from his mouth into his stomach. However, the Wenlong level seemed to be a nail driven into the throat of Tuanyuan. Similarly, he used one of the 2 swords to pierce the upper jaw of the swallowing dragon to fix his body. No matter what method the swallowing dragon used, Wenlong never relaxed at all. At the same time, Wenlong also continued to attack with another short sword. There is only one goal, and that is to completely pierce the upper jaw of the Yuan dragon. From breaking open the lower jaw of Tuanyuan dragon to piercing the upper jaw of Tun Yuan dragon. When the upper jaw of Tun Yuan dragon is completely pierced, it means that Wenlong's attack will directly reach the brain of Tun Yuan dragon. Even a monster as powerful as an ancient dragon species has absolutely no chance of surviving once its brain is destroyed. At this time, Wenlong's double swords were inserted into the upper jaw of the swallowing dragon, and the red and black dragon attribute energy continued to flow. It erodes deeply into the wound, and part of the dragon-type damage during this period even affects the brain of the swallowing dragon. At this time, Yin Yuanlong was completely frantic. Using the last of its strength, the swallowing dragon twisted its body like crazy, and at the same time slapped the ground with its huge fins, causing more and more terrible natural disasters. Even Shanlan Luodin and Lontong Zaisa had to issue a retreat order when they saw this situation. "Everyone leave quickly, otherwise there will be danger." The team hunting the Yuan dragon had to temporarily retreat, and even Catherine had to temporarily hide far away to avoid the sharp edge of the Yuan dragon. But everyone also knows that this is probably the final madness of Yin Yuanlong. Sure enough, after the violent outburst of the Yin Yuan dragon, the agitation of the giant beast gradually began to calm down. Everyone also realized that this was probably because Wenlong had completely broken open the upper jaw of the Yin Yuan dragon and invaded the Yin Yuan dragon because of the dragon's head. In fact, this was indeed the case. After a while, the movements of the Yuan dragon became smaller and smaller. Finally, this huge ancient dragon finally fell to the ground, leaving only its body still twitching from time to time. "Mr. Cat!" After seeing the Yuan dragon completely collapse, the first one to run over was Catherine, and behind Catherine was the equally anxious Haitang. So, Catherine and Haitang, who ran to Tuanyuan, worked together to pry open the huge mouth of Tuanyuan with their big swords. Finally, they saw the same exhausted Wenlong in the mouth of Tuanyuan. At this time, Wenlong was also covered in blood and fell on the tongue of Tuanyuan that had lost its vitality. He was panting heavily and looked like he had lost all his strength. After all, after using the secrets 3 times in one day, it is inevitable that the body's physical strength will be exhausted. Moreover, from the beginning of restraining the swallowing dragon to the final killing of the swallowing dragon, Wenlong participated in the whole battle from the beginning to the end. So it was consumed. It is natural that the body's physical strength is the greatest. Catherine and Haitang even saw that after such a fierce battle, the 2 dragon sealing sword, Xinjua sect, in Wenlong's hands had even become dim, which meant that these swords were extremely sharp. The ancient magic weapons are now severely worn due to the fierce battles. If they are to be used next time, they will probably need to be carefully polished by a famous blacksmith. But then again, no matter how embarrassed Wenlong is now, after all, Wenlong and others won the final victory in this battle. And this is the most important thing. Mr. Cat! That's great! At this time, seeing that Wenlong had no other serious problems except that he was too tired to stand up, Catherine happily rushed into Tunu Wenlong's mouth, and then hugged Wenlong. Stand up. Mr. Cat! We won! Catherine hugged Wenlong and said, ignoring the blood all over Wenlong's body. Ah! Yes! I finally won! It's really tiring to hunt the crab and the Yuanyan dragon continuously. Meow! The exhausted Wenlong also responded feebly. At this time, more people gathered around. They looked through the pried-open mouth of Tunu Wenlong, and then watched Catherine take Wenlong out of Tunu Wenlong's mouth. At this moment, everyone gave Wenlong the warmest applause and cheers. People know that it was because of this Elu Cat that Major Bolton was finally prevented from being destroyed by the double disasters of the Zhai crab and the Yuanyan dragon. It can be said that Wenlong is the biggest contributor to the fact that Metropolitan City survived the crisis safely. He successfully eliminated the Zhai crab and Yuan dragon in a short period of time. This means that Wenlong's achievements have completely surpassed Shenlanluo, Major Bolton, an older generation of legendary hunters like Din and Longtong Caesar. At this point, just being a hero is no longer enough to describe Wenlong's achievements. Even among legendary hunters, Wenlong's deeds are enough to transcend the region of Zixiride and reach the more distant East Zyriad, and places such as Shichi Kingdom were constantly praised by later hunters. Therefore, it is not surprising that Wenlong received the warmest applause and cheers from everyone. However, the people around him expressed their admiration and appreciation for Wenlong enthusiastically. At this time, Wenlong just responded lightly, "Don't make any noise. I want to have a good sleep." At this time, people finally suppressed the excitement in their hearts and calmed down temporarily. After all, no one wanted to disturb the precious rest time of the great hero who saved Major Bolton. After saying this, Wenlong immediately released the Elu Cat's backwater formation attached to his body. In the blink of an eye, Wenlong's body changed again, returning to the compact body shape of Elu Cat. Ah! It's still comfortable to sleep like this. Meow! After returning to Aluma's body, Wenlong twisted his body, buried his body into Catherine's soft and warm chest, and fell asleep comfortably. Chapter 649, The Forever Hunter, Final Chapter. Half-year later. Mr. Cat, what are we going to do in the future? It seems that no powerful monsters have appeared recently. Haitang asked Wenlong during dinner one day. Indeed, as Haitang said, since the crabs and Yuan dragons were hunted, and the members of the Poison Beak organization in the West Shuriide area were also eliminated, this has made the entire West Shuriide region insecure. After the Star Dragon incident, it rarely returned to a relatively calm state. Occasionally, some more powerful monsters appeared, but they were only flying dragon species such as male and female fire dragons, and ordinary 5-star hunters could deal with them. The activities of the ancient dragon species and other monsters whose strength is close to the ancient dragon species seem to have entered a dormant period again, with no signs of continuing to be active. Therefore, Wenlong and others were relatively leisurely during this period. They spent more time running the farm in the West Maluan Mountains and the newly built hot spring baths in the Alufa Snow Mountain. And because the specific matters had been handed over to the Hui and Xiao Hui, Reina and other Elu Cats manage it. So the so-called business activities are also very easy, almost to the extent that you can collect a lot of money just sitting around doing nothing every day. What are we going to do in the future? Wenlong thought for a while, and then said, I need to go back to Mau Mau village with Catherine in 2 days, and then stay there for a while. Meow. Are you going back? Haitang said in surprise. Yes. I need to take Catherine back to see my mother. But she will probably be shocked. Meow. Wenlong said with a strange smile. Really? Mr. Cat, you are making fun of me again. I'm a little nervous. Catherine also complained while stroking her belly. It's okay. My mother will definitely be very happy because I am the first Elu Cat in the village to marry a human girl. Meow. Wenlong comforted. How long will Mr. Cat and Sister Catherine stay in Cat Village? Haitang asked with some reluctance. Well, it won't be too long. But at least we have to wait until the child is born. We can't let her fight monsters with her big belly, Wenlong said, looking at Catherine with love. Catherine also smiled and responded to Wenlong with the same look. That's it. From Haitong's tone, both Wenlong and Catherine could feel the reluctance to leave. Little Begonia doesn't have to wait long, Catherine said at this time. After I give birth to the baby, we will continue to hunt. Really? A glint flashed in Haitong's eyes. And then she said happily, Haitang really wants to keep hunting with Mr. Cat and Sister Catherine like this. But there are no powerful monsters in the entire West Holred area now. The guild also has a commission for us, Catherine added. Actually, I have already discussed it with Mr. Cat. After I give birth to the baby this time, I will give the baby to Mother Cat to raise. Then Mr. Cat and I will travel to other parts of the mainland together. It is said that in more distant places there are many powerful monsters in this place. I wonder if you are willing to do so. Haitang? Haitang is willing. Before Catherine could finish her words, Haitang said loudly, That's great. In fact, we are very reluctant to let go of little Begonia. It would be great to be able to hunt together in the future. By the way, Rin also said that we would go together. Catherine also said happily, Rin? Isn't she in the Wanli hunting group? And I seem to have heard that in order to fill the vacancy of the hunting flute in the Wanli hunting group after the last battle with the crab, Rin doesn't need to chop the axe now. But let's use a hunting flute instead. Haitang said again. Yes, even though he switched to new weapons. In just half a year, Rin has become the second largest hunter in the Wanli hunting group. Second only to Commander Shisa. So he has considerable power, and can do whatever he wants. She has acted independently outside the hunting group. And Rin sent a letter a few days ago, saying that when I go on a trip, she will also ask for a long leave from the hunting group to go with us. That's good. I have another companion on the journey. And he is also the current chief hunting whistle of Wang Li's hunting group. I always feel that he is very reliable. Haitang also happily agreed. So it was decided that everyone would go on a hunting trip around the entire continent together. At this time, Wenlong also said with some emotion, Oh my. I still can't do without the life of hunting. I originally wanted to take a good rest for a while and experience a different life. I didn't expect that when it comes to hunting. You are more active than me. Meow. Of course. Because we are hunters and hunting is our life. Catherine and Haitang actually said together. Yes. Because we are hunters. Meow. Wenlong also said with a smile. Hello readers. I am the enhanced version of Spicy Beef. After nearly a year, this novel is finally finished. I would like to thank you all for your support. It is your support that allowed me to endure the boring life of coding and finish writing this novel. It is difficult for me to imagine it without you. Can I still hold on? Anyway, thank you all readers again. The new book will probably be released soon. I hope to see you again. Well, see you in the next book. Meow.